Good afternoon. I'd like to call the City Council meeting of September 15th, 2015 to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Francisco.
Here.
Hart.
Here.
Hotchkiss.
Here.
Murillo.
Here.
Rouse.
Here.
White. Mayor Schneider.
Here.
Okay. Proclamation declaring September 2015 as National Alcohol and Drug Addiction Recovery Month.
Who's here to receive this today? Come on up. Welcome. I don't bite. You can come closer. It's okay. It's all right. There we go. All right. In 2013, 21.6 million people in the United States, including 1.3 million youth aged 12 to 17, have faced a substance use disorder and all deserve to experience the many benefits of recovery. And 9 out of 10 Americans suffering from substance addiction began using alcohol and other drugs before age 18. And teen substance abuse underlies the largest preventable and most costly public health problem in America today. 78% of Santa Barbara high school students who participated in prevention activities reported that these activities helped them avoid alcohol and drug use. And treatment is cost effective, with some measurements showing a benefit to cost ratio of approximately 12 to 1, and every $1 invested in addiction treatment programs yielding a return of between $4 and $7 in reduced drug-related crime, criminal justice cost, and theft alone. So therefore, I, Helene Schneider, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Santa Barbara, California, do hereby proclaim September 2015 as National Alcoholism and Drug Addiction Recovery Month and call upon the people of Santa Barbara to celebrate people who recover. And thank you for your leadership on this very important topic. Thank you very much. If you'd like to introduce yourself and say a few words, it would be great. Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Ed Stonefelt, and I'm the Executive Director of the Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse. And I would like to thank the Mayor and the City Council for recognizing this month as National Alcohol and Drug Abuse Recovery Month. And I would also, in particular, like to thank the Council for recognizing the treatment community as a whole in Santa Barbara and the importance of treatment to a healthier community. And then finally, tomorrow from 12 to 1:30 at our detox center up on Placido, we are having an ice cream social, an open house for all of you to join us to again celebrate National Recovery Month. Thank you. And this is our team here from the council. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, changes to the agenda.
Yes, Madam Mayor, we would like to pull item 5, the recodification of ordinance authorizing the design, build, operate public works contracts. There was an error in the recommendation. We'd like to correct that. We'll just bring it back when it's ready.
Okay, is there a motion to pull item 5?
So moved.
Moved by Rouse, seconded by White. All in favor? Aye. Okay. All right. Move on to public comment. We have a number of speaker slips here, so I have 2 minutes up here at the podium, and we'll start with Michael Warnkin to be followed by Denise Adams.
Oh, I get picked first. Council, I've been gone for a while. I'm hired to do various jobs between states, dealing with cities, mostly government corruption. And I've been gone for a while, and something I was following happened I was really happy about. So since I'm back, I should at least say it. I'm stoked that single-member districts went through. I'm happy beyond belief. Upset that there was as much a fight over it as there was, and I've looked in the paper. It looks like there's a lot more competition for the offices. Robert Bacchus is a good friend of mine, and he's in North Carolina right now, and made it very clear to him. And he was so ecstatic because he worked on that issue for a long time. Remember talking to you, Mayor, about it. Remember years ago, well, I'm kind of for it and I'm kind of against it. Don't want to sound like a politician. And when you became mayor, no, I'm against it. And the reality is, the only way that citizens have access to the representatives is if they have single-member districts. And I have a nonprofit that I'm working on basically formed. It's called Restore Representation. And the fact that we have 7 people representing 92,000 or 90,000, whatever you want to call it, is pretty inadequate also. And basically, as it stands right now, it puts the executive branch government employees in charge, because in the end, they're really the only ones who end up voting, and you guys end up working for them, and the rest of us, get kicked around. I remember the gang injunctions pretty much what brought it forward. I remember reading that Acuna case, where they started gang injunctions, where they had people snorting cocaine on the hoods of cars, and shotguns were going off, and I was thinking to myself, God, that's not happening here. But you guys were elected at large, so you probably didn't know what was going on in your districts. I'm sorry. But that's kind of the way I feel. And everything I deal with from corruption is always because we don't have any oversight, and we don't have an adequate number of reps. And there's a number of you on this board I really like, and I just wish it would be more effective, and it would work the way it's supposed to. So anyway, thank you.
Denise Adams will be followed by Brandon Morris.
Hi, I'm just following up on a communication that I wrote to you with Denise Adams. I've been a 30-year resident of Montecito, one house outside of the city of Santa Barbara. I am here today to ask you if you would, at some future point in time, consider ad hoc representation of those of us who live in the county who receive Santa Barbara Water District services. Mr. White heard me yesterday, or was it the Water Commission meeting that I attended. At some point, if you would consider representation of us, and also if you would at some point consider a water use category for large properties that are in the high fire risk area, because our needs are very unique, our insurance premiums, and we are the buffer zone along Barker Pass, burned out in 1977, and then again 2008, 2009. Alternatively, I would like to ask you to consider that when the Montecito Water District moratorium is lifted, that you consider approaching Montecito to take us all back, because you've been serving people like me for 30 years, and perhaps when the moratorium's over and water issues and desal and all that get resolved 5 years down the road, or whenever that happens, if we could approach LAFCO about getting everything cleaned up so that the city of Santa Barbara people on Montecito water go back to the city, and Montecito people go back to Montecito. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Brandon Morris will be followed by Christelle Barros.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, here we go again. One thing you may not be aware of is that on the 11th of August, Jerry Brown, our governor, signed a bill into law called the Right to Record Act, SB 411, which received bipartisan support. SB 411 clarifies individuals' First Amendment right to record police officers by stating that a civilian recording while an officer is in the public place, or a person recording in a place that he or she has the right to be, is not violating the law. It makes clear that recording does not constitute reasonable suspicion to detain a person or probable cause to make an arrest. This bill also protects individuals from having their data looked into without a warrant. Now, why am I telling you this? Well, unfortunately, over the last couple of years, I've heard a lot of complaints about the Santa Barbara Police Department, and more recently, several individuals that I have trained specifically on how to interact with police, law enforcement, and the course of their duties have been arrested, detained, harassed, and battered. Unfortunately, it seems like the First Amendment isn't clear enough, so that our state legislature has to pass legislation that says if a public person is in a public place in the course of their duties, they have no reasonable expectation of privacy. Now, here's the problem. Whenever an officer acts outside of the scope and authority of their office, they're no longer immune. So that means that if an individual batters me under California Penal Code 242, I can place them in their own handcuffs if I need to under California Penal Code 837, which means I can also elicit help from other individuals to be able to place that individual under arrest. Now, whenever we're talking about at least 4 cases, and I have contacted several members of this board, including Madam Mayor, and no one's returned to my phone calls on these or contact on these particular issues, it seems to me that you guys are a very litigious board, and the only way we're going to be able to solve this is through litigation. So if I have to, I'll fight every single case that the Santa Barbara Police Department does bring about, and then we'll sue you, but I would hope that you would do better training. Thank you.
Crystal Barrios, and is Robin Chybik here? Robin. You're giving your 2 minutes to Ms. Barrios, and then after that will be Jim Farned. So you have up to 4 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Crystal Barros. I'm a resident of the Flamingo Mobile Home Park. It provides low-income housing to seniors, some of whom are disabled. Our park is located on Santa Barbara's east side and is designated an AE flood zone. Sycamore Creek runs through the park, and it flooded our park not once but twice in 1995. As a member of the Flamingo Mobile Home Park Disaster Preparedness Team, I speak for our park residents and other members of our coalition to express our urgent concern about the risk of Sycamore Creek flooding from the predicted El Nino storms. We're asking to be placed on your City Council agenda so that we may describe our concerns and present our ideas for partnering with the city to explore flood prevention solutions and implement emergency preparedness systems. We specifically request city partnership in the following 4 areas. 1, creek cleanup. Due to the unique vulnerability of our resident seniors, County Flood Control has agreed to our request to expedite their routine maintenance of Sycamore Creek. While we are grateful for that consideration, we would like the city to review the maintenance plan to ensure that it's an adequate response to the storms we potentially face. Number 2, the creek infrastructure. The culvert at Indio Muerto has been known to clog with debris and obstruct creek water flow. We urge the city to create a system to monitor this location and to stage equipment to remove debris during the intense rain events. Number 3, emergency response system. We ask that the city join the Flamingo Mobile Home Park Disaster Preparedness Coalition and create a comprehensive emergency response plan. And number 4, effective communication. We suggest that the city appoint a council person to serve as liaison to the Flamingo Disaster Preparedness Team to ensure a clear and accurate flow of information. We welcome the opportunity to partner with City Council to identify problems and implement short-term solutions to the potential floods we face this season. We hope to continue a partnership to explore long-term solutions as well. Thank you for considering and placing us on your agenda.
Thank you. Jim Farned will be followed by Jesse Espinoza along with Sarah Patchen. Is Jim not here? Oh, there you are. Come on up.
I just want to underscore our need for a knowledgeable, authoritative liaison with departments for disaster control and response. We've received confusing and indeed at times contradictory replies to our repeated inquiries. We very much need to know someone who knows. Also, the next meeting of our preparedness team will be held at Flamingo Park, 1210 Cacique Street, tomorrow at 5:30 p.m., and all are invited to attend.
Thank you. Jesse Espinoza?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm speaking for Sarah. She cannot be here today.
Okay.
So she would like me to read the statement. It says, my name is Sarah Patchen. Sorry I'm not unable to make this public comment in person. I am a member of the Flamingo Mobile Home Park Disaster Preparedness Team, and I lived in the park for the past 29 years. When the Sycamore Creek threatened to flood the park in 1995, several residents were concerned about the buildup in debris in the Indio Muerto Culvert Bridge. When the creek did flood, it devastated the park grounds, destroyed and damaged mobile homes, and left residents emotionally and physically distraught. 3 months later, the creek flooded again. Following the 2 floods, bulldozers removed accumulated sediment to enlarge the creek capacity. Creek maintenance continued each year thereafter. So when the huge El Nino storm of '98 occurred, the creek was able to accommodate the large flow of water. However, downstream debris once again was accumulated at the culvert. When the creek was within inches of flooding, I personally observed county flood crews with equipment to remove large chunks of debris to allow the free flow of the water through the culvert. Without this timely removal of debris, I believe that the creek would have flooded the park again, as it did in 1995. To reduce the risk of this flooding from this year's El Nino. The city should systematically plan to monitor the Indio Muerto culvert during these intense rains with the appropriate equipment staged to remove the debris. No one knows when and if the rains will come, and if it does, whether it is possible to prevent flooding. But let's all partner together to give flood prevention our best shot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to mention our Public Works Director, Rebecca Bjork's in the back. If you haven't met her, she's the good contact person for these issues, and so she's listening intently on this. Jacqueline Inda, yes, Mr. White, did you have a question?
There was an announcement of a time. Was there a time announced on that meeting?
5:30 p.m.
5:30.
Wednesday, 5:30 p.m.
No, it's Thursday.
Thursday, 5:30 p.m. The 17th. Okay. All right. Jacqueline Inda will be followed by Phil Walker.
Members of council and the public, my name is Jacqueline Inda, and I'm running for City Council to represent the East Side. I'm also here as a resident. I received a notice from the city to go to a workshop in regards to FEMA and flood insurance. As many other residents, we received those notices and we became alarmed and wanted to know exactly where the responsibility of cleaning up the creeks comes from. So rather than just alarming the community and sitting with that alarm, I definitely feel that a good opportunity has arisen now to create a special community meeting where council and the community and the county can come together in a special workshop, go over the details so that the community could understand what the plan might be, and then work together with CERT and with Listos and other organizations to get the information out to the community so that we can all prepare for any kind of emergency. So I really hope you do take that into consideration. I also feel that right now we don't have districts, so we don't have a council person that people can connect to. So identifying one of you folks that could create that kind of liaison partnership with all of these different organizations and groups, it would be definitely appropriate at this time. So thank you very much.
Phil Walker will be followed by Lee Moldaver.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. Bringing up the Sycamore Creek flood, it sort of diverted me from what I was going to speak about, but my wife's grandma's Alta's house was severely flooded on Punta Gorda. She's right on the corner of Canada Street, and I know what these people went with because Alta's house actually had 18 inches of flood flow flowing in the back door from Sycamore Creek out the front door, and then it went down to the RV park where the very quick gentleman with a fire axe punched holes through the sound wall down there. It was wooden at the time and allowed the flood to go down, but it was definitely life-threatening because in the old 1947 house, the wiring was underneath the floor, and it actually energized the water. And fortunately, Mr. Graham across the street was able to de-energize, throw the breaker. Everybody in there was getting shocked. So it was a very, very quick, dangerous situation. The Punta Gorda Bridge is, and widening of the creek downstream from there is a big, big plus improvement. The only pinch point in that area I see is the Santa Fe Railroad Bridge. So it's a concern. I was walking up here on De La Guerra Street, and there was a city Vactor collections crew hard at work, and they pointed out to all the pepper trees. They said, yeah, and they were going on about roots. These guys work hard for collections. I work with them. And, yeah, if you got roots, you got trees, or vice versa. So this is Tree City, USA. You're going to have roots, but you just got to roll with it. One other quick thing. In my lifetime, I turned past 69. I'm still working. I was born up in the Bay Area, and I've never seen the firestorms like are going on up there today. And you got to remember, 3 or 4 days before the T fire in November 11th, we actually had a ½ inch of rain. So
thank you.
It's called be prepared, right? Thank you.
Lee Moldaver will be followed by Tom Woodrow.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm Lee Moldaver, a local resident. I think at some point in our lives, we're all exposed to Stephen Crane's book, The Red Badge of Courage, either in school or just for fun. And it talks about people or how institutions or people react to unplanned emergencies or stress. And I could go into one of them, but you're going to be talking about that for item 15, so I won't talk about that approach. But I'd like to talk about another approach. I'm thinking about someone who is well recognized in the community for their work with public safety, mental health, human and social services, homeless issues, sleep issues, safety issues, education issues, and that's just the spare time stuff. The full-time position is running the Santa Barbara Public Library system, in which Irene Macias, the person I'm talking about, has had to deal over the last 6 or 7 years since the national economic meltdown with really, really tough, challenging cuts. And rather than go into the darkness or into despair, it made her and her team and her employees reconsider how libraries work, how space is allocated, what services customers want, how to do it better with less, how to do it smarter. And I think a part of the culmination of that, which many of you were there for, was on Sunday, where the dream of a generation of a really first-class, futuristic children's education library was dedicated. And how this woman who's about to retire now is able to mobilize community support, keep her staff morale together, achieve all of these ends, following in the footsteps of Greg's dad and Carol Cater. So we've had 3 librarians in 45 years. That is an incredible record. And I just wanted to come and take 2 minutes to say thank you.
Thank you. Tom Woodrow will be followed by Scott Wentz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Tom Woodrow, City Watch. As you know, we're a watchdog group. And last week, I think in the news press, there was another article on the minimum wage. And so I thought instead of coming here and just giving you kind of my steering committee's opinion of the minimum wage and how that might hurt Santa Barbara, I'd reach out to local businesses and even some of their employees. So I just have a brief report. I did speak with about almost a dozen restaurateurs in Santa Barbara. I spoke with 23 employees of these establishments about the minimum wage. And I think without exception, people are concerned about the consequences of artificially raising the minimum wage beyond what the market will bear. The notion that what's going on in L.A. and Seattle, would hit Santa Barbara. Number one, it will affect prices most likely on restaurants and therefore affect how much people pay for food and whether or not they want to go out to dinner. Number two, some employees were upset with the idea that their wage they might have worked up to a manager position or a more senior position, and that a new person would immediately come in at $15 an hour, and they feel frustrated that they got their chance to, show their merit, and then now someone else automatically gets that wage. I think that's frustrating. Also, if you read a story about McDonald's going increasingly to automation, what the minimum wage does is it accelerates automation. I mean, that's a trend that's happening anyway. You see even some upscale restaurants, you're able to order from these iPads or whatever device and basically cuts out the labor. And so while it might be well-meaning on the part of certain politicians to try to appeal to a certain constituency and say, hey, we're raising the minimum wage, it's going to be good for everybody, it doesn't really work that way. In the end, people do lose their jobs, they do lose their hours, they do lose their benefits, and there's always a consequence to that kind of action. So I just know this is a savvy council, group of sharp individuals, and you've been elected for a reason to make good decisions. And I hope that you won't fall prey to what's happening in some of these cities across the United States, which is really hurting local business. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Scott Wentz will be followed by John Thomas, and then Richard Robinson, and then Jeff Bard will be the final speaker.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Scott Wentz representing Cars Are Basic. Last time I was here, I talked with you about the issue of 1818 Castillo and the anger of the neighborhood over the high density and the lack of parking and the impact it was going to have on Castillo Street. I also talked about the people's anger over the proposed bicycle master plan where they want to take lanes off the streets. This is a consistent theme that the people are angry about. Well, again, it happened. 715 Bond Street. 4-story building, high density, 23 I believe 23, 24 potential residents there, inadequate parking, 4 stories high next to the junior high school. The people were angry. You haven't seen it yet, but it was there. It was at the ABR. And they were just out in force. And you actually had one of the members of the board say, ask the designer, do you actually believe this is a reasonable design? Your average unit density is meeting huge opposition. Because of the impacts on parking in the streets, you have to do something about reversing it because the people aren't going to stand for it. Thank you.
Don Thomas?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I just wanted to go quickly and invite you to the 22nd Annual Mental Health Arts Festival. Everyone's got one of these cards. It's on Saturday, October 3rd in De La Guerra Plaza from 11 to 4. And the members that I work with over at the Mental Wellness Center have been working all year long for this. So if anybody in your constituents would be interested in art, it would be great for that. And the second question, I would like to ask Councilwoman Kathy Murillo to consider mentoring me to be able to run for City Council in District 1 one day. So if you would think about it, let me know. Thank you.
Richard Robinson?
Honorable Mayor, members, El Nino has been we know. We're in for a really wet winter, thank God. But I'm reminded of something that Harriet, when Mayor Miller was sitting in your seat, there were folks who wouldn't listen to her. She simply said during the hot weather, and folks are complaining about the temperature, I'm writing a book, and this is one of the parts of my book that really is hilarious. She simply sat there and she listened to a lot of talk about this and that and blah, 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 and she said simply, thank you, ma'am, for listening to me, but she said, you better fix the drain. Pardon me for laughing, but she was her words presaged what we remembered, one of the most terrible storms we could have. The flooding was ridiculous. Why? Because folks forgot. Some folks forgot. Yeah, it's hot, and we tend to ignore the necessity for cleaning the drains. And Harry just sat there and she just kind of going, you better fix the drains. Thank you, ma'am.
Jeff Bard?
Hi, Madam Mayor, members of council. My name is Jeff Bard. I was appointed to a 4-year term on the South Coast Homeless Advisory Committee. And the committee actually didn't last that long, but I still feel a moral obligation, not to quit advocating for the homeless, especially when I understand there is an El Nino and we could have a potentially disastrous situation on our hands. So we need to start putting our thinking caps on and not rely entirely on the warming centers, but we maybe need to actually invoke the Red Cross or some other creative remedies if we find ourselves being besieged. And I would be the guy to point out that we certainly do not want a double disaster. If there is a bad flu season, or if we get, Middle East respiratory syndrome or syncytial virus or measles, mumps, God knows what. If there is an infectious disease outbreak, I don't have a lot of confidence that the good folks at the warming center want to hear from me, because I'm the guy who wanted them to invoke knuckle bumping, cough into your elbow, and wash your hands as a policy. And for that, I was ousted when I was myself homeless. So Dr. Postowski probably supports all my recommendations, but he's overruled by the people that are running the warming centers. So I hope I don't have to come in here and report that there's a bad flu season coming. But when they come in for their community development block grant, you might actually consider asking them what they're doing in terms of infection control. Because since I made a nuisance of myself, there have been many jurisdictions that have actually come out with new guidelines for operating shelters during epidemics. And so hopefully we will get good preventive health measures in place when the storms hit, before and not after an epidemic breaks out. That being said, though, I do conditionally support the warming centers, and if you end up working with them and expanding them, so be it. But seriously, if we can just have people observing good common sense, then we won't have to deal with a disease outbreak at the same time. Meanwhile, with Operation Heal, we're looking at training people on recognizing hypothermia and so forth. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment. Move on to the consent calendar. You have some items to read.
Item number 2, adoption of ordinance to amend Municipal Code Chapter 5.66, news racks. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only. An ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending Chapter 5.66 of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code to establish news rack regulations. Item number 3, adoption of ordinance for amendment to agreement for Elings Park Recycled Water Booster Pump Station. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only. An ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving Amendment 1 to the agreement number 24,316 between the City of Santa Barbara and the Elings Park Foundation dated January 10, 2013 for the use and delivery of the city's recycled water and for the construction of an on-site recycled water booster pump station at Elings Park. Item number 4, statement of investment policy and delegation of investment authority for fiscal year 2016. Recommendation that council adopt by reading a title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara adopting the investment policy for the city and rescinding resolution number 14-060. Item number 6, resolution adopting the findings for 1912 Mission Ridge Road appeal. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara denying the appeal and upholding the decision of the Single Family Design Board granting final approval of the project design approval for additions to the residence at 1912 Mission Ridge Road. Item number 8, introduction of ordinances for lease amendments with Mercury Air Center, Santa Barbara Incorporated, and Signature Flight Support Corporation. Recommendation that Council A introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving and authorizing the airport director to execute a lease amendment to lease agreement number 200846 as previously amended November 22, 2011 with Mercury Air Center, Santa Barbara Incorporated, a California corporation, DBA Atlantic Aviation, amending the term and rent provisions to extend the expiration date to May 8, 2018. And provide for appropriate rental increases during the extended term, and B, introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving and authorizing the airport director to execute a lease amendment to restated lease number 12,037.2 with Signature Flight Support Corporation, a California corporation, dated October 18, 2012, amending the term and rent provisions to extend the expiration date to May 8, 2018, and provide for appropriate rental increases during the extended term. And item number 12, compliance with Healthy Workplace Healthy Family Act of 2014. Recommendation that Council B, ratify the agreement with the hourly bargaining unit through introduction and subsequent adoption of, by reading of title only, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending the existing 2014 to 2016 Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Santa Barbara and the Hourly Employees Bargaining Unit to comply with the Healthy Family Act of 2014, and C, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving an unrepresented hourly employees paid sick leave law policy.
Okay. Without further objection, we'll waive further reading. We've already pulled item 5. There was a request for item 11. Any other items to pull from the consent calendar? Okay. Item 11, I think you already, it's the contract for, did you read item 11? Why don't you read item 11? You're doing so well.
Item number 11, contract for construction of pedestrian crosswalk improvements at 4 intersections.
Thank you, Mr. Hotchkiss. And we do have a public comment speaker slip on this as well. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to see, I asked Mr. Wozniak to bring the plans for this, the diagram of how the streets will be affected at Palo Colorado and State Street, I guess, correct?
Yes. Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, good afternoon. My name is Derek Bailey from the city's Public Works Department. We actually have a really brief PowerPoint presentation that was already put together. We have a presentation to the Police and Fire Commission next Thursday about this intersection. This intersection's on their radar because of some of the pedestrian safety concerns and accessibility issues at this intersection. So I'll just run through this really quickly. This project is located at the intersection of State Street and Kayapala, Colorado. So this is on Outer State Street, running side to side in this part of State Street. And this is De La Vina Street where it meets in with State Street. So it's just a few hundred feet west of that De La Vina State Street intersection. It's an important intersection, pedestrian crossing-wise. Kayapala, Colorado leads right into the heart of the San Roque neighborhood. And on the south side of the intersection is an entrance to Mackenzie Park. So people from the neighborhood use that crossing to get back and forth to the park. As well, there's transit stops on either side of the street right there. The reason we're pursuing a project at this intersection is because of pedestrian safety concerns. This intersection in our most recent collision analysis period from 2011 to 13 was number 2 in Santa Barbara for a total number of pedestrian-involved collisions. There was 2 in 2011, 1 in 2012, and 1 in 2013. What also stands out to us is the severity of the pedestrian-involved collisions. Everyone that gets hit at this intersection gets injured. And since 2011, there's been 11 pedestrians injured, 3 of them severely so. Here are the plans. So what were the features that are...
If I could ask just for a second.
Yes, sir.
Is that a result of people speeding on State Street? Is that because you're talking about severe injuries?
The causes vary. Obviously, it's all failure to yield to pedestrians in a crosswalk. But it varies whether or not it's speeding. It's just the driver didn't see the pedestrian. It is a very wide intersection. There's kind of a lot going on there. So sometimes as you're driving down the street there, it is challenging to see pedestrians stepping off the curb when there's a very wide intersection in front of them.
Is another problem that a vehicle may be already stopped and you're approaching from the rear and you don't see why they're stopped? And then you hit the pedestrian as they emerge from the stopped vehicle?
None of the collisions that we reviewed had that collision pattern, although it's certainly a concern on multi-lane streets.
Okay, thank you.
The features that will be included as part of this project, there's a median refuge island planned. There's an existing striped median there right now, so it'll just be built within those double yellow lines. We will be rebuilding the pedestrian access ramps on the north side because they don't meet ADA. And as well, we're planning a curb extension on the south side of the road. We will be eliminating the crosswalk on the western leg, right there. And we will be encouraging pedestrians to travel across the east side. The reason we're doing that is because of the striped median straight across from that left turn lane, we can fit in a median refuge island. It's a great safety feature where we have room to do it, and we do have room at this location. The curb extension is going in on the south side of the road. It's currently all red curb. There's going to be no loss of parking. There is a bus stop immediately west of the intersection. So one thing this actually does, by bringing the pedestrians' starting point for its crossing out, they can see around a parked or a stopped bus a lot easier. You know, if not for this curb extension, we'd probably be looking at pushing the bus stop further west, which would displace more parking. So this curb extension can be viewed as a way to preserve some of the parking adjacent to Mackenzie Park. Then the last feature will be the pedestrian-activated flashers.
How deep is that curb extension? How much are you going into the street there?
About 7 feet. The parking lane right there is about 8 feet. And so there's a bike lane in between the traffic lane and the curb extension. So there is a buffer of about 7 feet between traffic and that curb extension.
So you're not impinging on any existing auto lanes?
No, it's really dead, unused pavement right there. You can't park there. There's no travel lane. It's really not serving any purpose.
Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Wentz, did you want to come up on this item?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Scott Wentz representing Cars Are Basic, and I would ask you to give me a little leeway on this because of Mr. Bailey's presentation. First off, the bulb outs on Carrillo Boulevard are not needed. Mr. Bailey has already said they're not needed. The bulb outs on Isley and Pedregosa on State Street are not needed. The issue is line of sight, as was in the report. You have approximately 200 to 300 line of sight on every one of those intersections, except for this one. So if you have a line of sight that's in excess of what the state of California asks for, then why would you go to the expense of putting in bulb outs that cost, what, $30,000, $40,000? You have a deficit in street repair. Why not put it into street repair? The other thing is that bulb outs were put in specifically by Drusilla Van Hingel, and here's a quote from her from the Traffic Circulation Committee. We're putting in bulb outs, and one of the primary reasons we're putting them in is so that we can force bicyclists out in the traffic so that traffic will have to slow down. Not because they make pedestrians safer. The city of Santa Barbara has no study. As Christine Anderson, sitting right there, was embarrassed because we hammered on her for years, and we finally forced her to say yes or no. Do you have a study that proves that bulb outs make pedestrians safer? And she had to say no. Now, in regard to this issue, this is a pile of junk. The city of Santa Barbara created the accident issue by putting in a second crosswalk. If you take out that crosswalk, most of your accidents are going to disappear. And one of the reasons you have a problem here is because when people come around the corner on Delavina Street, State Street tilts this way, and because you're turning left, you can't see whether somebody's coming across there. And I'd like to know how many of those people that were injured were drunks coming out of the park, because there's a severe problem there. Get rid of that crosswalk.
Time. Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor, there's one other item that needs to be addressed here. Please, may I? I'll make it really quick.
I'd like to hear it. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Emergency response on this street by the fire department generally comes right down the middle of that intersection, right down the middle of it, because the traffic is so congested at that location. And I just saw it last week with the fire truck coming down there. Everybody's over here, they came down the middle. You put a pedestrian refuge in there, you're going to have trouble.
Okay, it's to the council. Mr. Hotchkiss, did you want to vote on this separately?
I would like to ask, could you respond to some of the things that he was saying? It doesn't look to me like bicycle traveling is that the lane is preserved all the way down there, even with this bulb out. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, the bike lane is preserved. Just follow the cursor here. It passes right by the curb extension.
Right.
And from there it turns right onto southbound De La Vina.
The accidents that you cited, what direction were cars traveling on State Street? Do you recall?
About 50-50, and it's also split about 50-50 between the two different crosswalks. So if the problem were really that crosswalk on the east leg of the intersection, we would expect that would be where all the collisions would happen.
Well, it is a hard place to see things. I mean, it's a tough intersection, particularly if you're coming off De La Vina, turning onto State Street. Does this change or improve sight lines at all, or how does it affect? I think that's the hardest thing to read.
For the people coming off De La Vina, it doesn't change sight lines at all, but what they will see is the flashing lights. It'll give them warning that there is a pedestrian present.
In the past, you've made the comment, counterproductive as it might seem, that sometimes crosswalks create more accidents than they prevent because people make an assumption that they're going to be safe. Am I misquoting you, or?
That's roughly correct.
So, what should we look at here? We got to figure out, we got to know if we did the right thing.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, the thing we have to be careful about with crosswalks is instilling that confidence in pedestrians, that I'm protected within these two white lines, and drivers are going to see me. When I step out into the road, they're going to yield to me. And that could be argued that's what's happening here, because that's all the traffic control we have is just crosswalks. But the other thing we have to consider is pedestrian mobility. If this is truly a place where pedestrians are crossing and they want to cross, then we have a responsibility to upgrade the traffic control to make it such that they can cross.
At least anecdotally, I think that the flashing lights on Milpas, for instance, are pretty effective. I know I see them 2 blocks away and start slowing down. Have we got any traffic history now, having installed those, 2 years ago, How are we doing? Any thoughts and any study at all about that?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, we did a yielding study, and so we found the yielding rates at the flashers on Milpa Street are up around 90-95%. That's really good compared to what it was before. As far as collisions, there was a collision at Milpas and Yananali Street with the flashers activated. But to our knowledge, there haven't been any other collisions at any of the locations in the city where we have the flashers.
Okay. Thank you for your explanation.
Okay, do we have a motion for the balance of the consent calendar?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Okay, moved by Murillo, second by White. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you. Report from the Finance Committee, Mr. Francisco.
Madam Mayor, the Finance Committee met today and heard and recommended to the full council that we adopt a minor change to our investment policy, which we just did. And we also heard the fourth quarter report and recommended to the full council that we adopt certain changes to the budget.
Okay, thank you. And the Ordinance Committee, Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Ordinance Committee met today to discuss amendments to the peddling and soliciting ordinance instituting time, place, and manner restrictions on street vending from vehicles, and a rather robust discussion with it agreed to move forward to council the recommendations by staff, but also to have a working group to discuss amongst the business owners some of the ramifications of the ordinance that we talked about. The second item to permit car share operations was tabled indefinitely until staff felt more comfortable with their information.
Great. And actually, I watched part of the Ordinance Committee meeting. One of the things I know I've worked on with Mark Alvarado in our Parks and Rec Department has to do with the summertime kids meal programs, and so I think that was partly brought up, and I know Nancy Weiss's name was brought up. But that's been an incredible, important program with the city and the health fair that's coming up in October. So as you move forward, maybe to make sure to incorporate those kind of activities.
It is, Madam Mayor, and it was considered, and our main focus on this, of course, was the street safety, particularly around with children around schools and, of course, the public right-of-way in the streets.
Great, thanks. Okay. All right, item number 14.
Fiscal year 2015, fourth quarter review.
All right, Mr. Samario.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Bob Samario, Finance Director. I am joined to my right by Jennifer Tomaszewski. She's our new accounting manager, been with the city for 6 weeks. This is her inaugural presentation. And she'll be doing part of the report. I'm also joined by Ms. Julie Nemes. She's our treasury manager. So we're here to present the fourth quarter report. We do this every quarter. We tell you the status of revenues, expenditures relative to budget. The fourth quarter report's a little different in that we kind of know what the final numbers are. The numbers are still going to be subject to change. We still got our audit to complete and all that, but we think these numbers are pretty close to final, but still technically preliminary. We're going to go through the general fund revenues, and Ms. Nemes will cover that, and then Ms. Tomaszewski will cover general fund expenditures, enterprise funds, and I'll wrap up looking at showing you where we're at with our reserves based on our preliminary numbers. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Nemes.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. I am Julie Nemes, the Treasury Manager for the Finance Department. I will be first going over the general fund revenues, as Mr. Samario mentioned, and then I'll be passing it over to Ms. Tomaszewski to go over the general fund expenditures and the enterprise funds. First, I'll be going over a summary of the general fund revenues. As you can see, actuals for the current year compared to budget in total came in about $2.2 million over budget. All revenues on every category, taxes, other revenues, fees, and charges, all of them came in above budget. However, the majority of the variances were in taxes and fees and charges. But for the year overall, it was $2.2 million. Now I can get into a little more detail for each of the individual categories. This first table is regarding tax revenues. You'll see that in total, tax revenues exceeded budget by about $1.4 million. There's a couple variances I was going to focus on. One, I wanted to mention sales and use tax. Even though it only came in about $55,000 above budget, this is not a final number. We get the final sales tax number in late September, and we actually just got that number in. So that variance ended up being about $200,000 over. It just isn't represented in this report. I wanted to talk about the property tax number. It came in about $475,000 above budget. However, we did also receive about another $50,000 related to fiscal year 15, so that variance ended up being about $525,000. And that was just due to primarily secured and unsecured taxes that came in for higher assessed values. The next variance I'd like to discuss is utility users tax. It came in about $350,000 below budget, and we've talked about this at a few other quarterly reports. There really are two causes. The first is a reduction in water usage, and the second is a transition from the traditional cellular and landline phone service to prepaid cell phone usage. And the last variance I'd like to discuss is TOT, transient occupancy taxes. We're still seeing these go up after year. It's gone up about $1.1 million compared to budget for the current year, and it's gone up from prior year by about 12%. The great weather conditions are still playing a role. There's more rooms available, room rates are gone up, and also vacation rentals are up. Thanks. Other revenues are really in line, actuals are in line with budget. There really is a variance of only about $27,000, but when you look at the individual lines, you'll see a lot of variance. Some are higher, some are lower than budget. So I'm going to focus on a couple variances here. The first one being fines and forfeitures. Fines and forfeitures are about $183,000 below budget for the fiscal year. These are due to two reasons. The first one being a decrease in municipal court fines. The second one being a decrease in police parking citations. We believe this is due to some staff vacancies in that division within police. The second variance I'm going to focus on is intergovernmental revenues. You notice those are about $325,000 greater than budget. That is almost entirely due to mutual aid reimbursement revenues for the fire department. It was budgeted originally at about $420,000, whereas revenues came in over $770,000. You will notice that it is actually down 24% from the prior year. That is due to the fire department receiving over $1 million in mutual aid reimbursement revenues in the prior year. The last variance I was going to mention is just that miscellaneous revenues are down about $50,000 compared to budget, but we have the next slide that goes into the detail. So this is a detail of that $50,000 variance, and you'll notice that it's all due to operating transfers in, which are down $143,000. That is all due to transfers from the Traffic Safety Fund. We do get into the general fund, Traffic Safety Fund transfers for moving traffic citations. We do believe that that's also due to those temporary vacancies in the police department. The last table I'm going to discuss are departmental fees and service charges. Overall, the departmental fees and service charges came in about $760,000 over budget. And once again, you'll see there's variances. Some are below and some are above budget for the year. There's a couple variances I'll focus on again. Community development came in about $130,000 below budget. And this is really, it's not that it came in below prior years. You'll notice it's 5% above prior year. It's just that it came in below what they anticipated they would receive this year. And that's primarily in building-related charges, in work orders and building permit fees. Public safety came in under budget by about $96,000, and that's primarily due to lower dismissal fees, which we think, once again, are due to some vacancies. And the last variance I'd like to talk about is the reimbursements by about $956,000 above budget for the year. This is entirely due to over $1 million of SB 90 mandated cost reimbursements that the city received this year. And what that is that for many years, since the 90s, we have been submitting claims for reimbursements for the required mandates that we have to do. The state requires us to do this. We can submit the claims for reimbursement. However, many years ago, the state stopped submitting the reimbursements to us. The governor finally permitted reimbursements back to local agencies, and we received $1.1 million of reimbursements in fiscal year 15. Since we produced these interim reports, we received another $120,000. So that number is actually about $1.2 million for fiscal year 15.
Madam Mayor, what reimbursements for what?
There are different kinds of claims. The state requires us to do different types of activities or reporting, and we are allowed to then group those costs together and submit them to the state for reimbursement. Some examples are there's a lot of police-related activities, such as domestic violence reporting and assistance that we do. Also, identity theft activities when we go and we research identity theft and provide assistance to victims of identity theft. We can then combine all those costs, submit them to the state, show what we spent, and get reimbursed for it. However, they did halt the reimbursement of those costs for many, many years, and the governor finally approved in his budget for FY15 to start reimbursing agencies for those costs.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that is everything I was going to present on revenues, unless you have any other questions. Thank you. I'm going to now pass it off to our county manager. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. I'm Jennifer Tomaszewski, the accounting manager for the finance department, and I will be reviewing general fund expenditures and enterprise funds with you today. We did go over these in detail with the finance committee, so I will be discussing the overall results, but I'd be happy to answer any questions when we're done. So this first slide that we're looking at is general fund expenditures for June 30th. The first column lists the departments, the general fund departments. The second column, the annual budget. These are original adopted budget along with prior year carry forwards and any budget appropriations approved throughout the year. Again, as Mr. Samario mentioned, these are preliminary numbers. We're confident that they're fairly close, but they may change somewhat. The next column, without encumbrances, this is basically the variance, the difference between budget and actual. We do list the encumbrances separately, as these may carry forward. Most likely, the $920,000 will carry forward. These are committed but not yet spent at year end. And then the last two columns are the variance with the encumbrances included. In total, we did end the year with a $4.4 million savings to expenditures at year end. When you account for the $920,000 of encumbrances that will carry forward, this leaves approximately $3.5 million that would be savings at year end. The main driver for the savings across most departments related to vacancies. Departments lost staff due to retirements and other reasons, and they've just struggled to fill the vacancies with qualified candidates. So that was the main driver for the savings. One item to point out is with regard to fire. Fire ended the year about $526,000 in a deficit. This last year, fire had an unusually high occurrence of injuries and medical leave. This, coupled with minimum staffing requirements and higher than anticipated mutual aid activities, led to large overages and overtime costs. A portion of these costs were offset by small savings in regular salary from vacancies, and also a small amount of discretionary spending savings as well. These costs, the costs that were associated with mutual aid activities were offset with mutual aid reimbursements. However, they did still end the year with a deficit. On the next slide, we will discuss enterprise funds. Again, similar to the last slide, the first column lists the enterprise funds. The second column is the original adopted budgets with prior year carry forwards and any any approvals for budget changes throughout the year. The actual year to date, again, is preliminary numbers at this point, and the variance is the difference between budget and actual, and for this discussion, these do include encumbered amounts. We're just going to talk about a couple of these Again, we did go over these in detail with the Finance Committee. We'd like to point out the water fund. The water fund ended the year with about a $4 million shortfall. About $3.5 million of this was due to a water sales deficit. The city implemented conservation efforts, and people exceeded those expectations with regard to water consumption. On the flip side, the water fund expenses were below budget, about $5.6 million. About $1.6 million of this was savings from principal loan repayments budgeted for the Cater Advanced Water Treatment Plant and the Ortega Groundwater Treatment Plant projects. The Cater project was complete. However, the Ortega project has been delayed, and the two projects are tied together for the loan. So there will be no principal payments until both projects are completed. Let's see. About $2 million of this is a result of lower water production costs as well. There was about 38% less water treated this fiscal year in comparison to last year. Another $810,000 of this savings is actually encumbrances that will be carried forward into the next year. For the wastewater fund, revenues were ended the year with about a $940,000 shortfall. Again, this was related to the reduction in water usage, as a portion of the sewer service charges are based on discharges as measured through water usage. The wastewater fund expenses were down at the end of the year $2.3 million. About $500,000 of this was due to salary savings from vacancies. At any given time throughout the year, they were about 2 to 4 employees down on average. The computer maintenance management system upgrade was delayed. Incomplete submittals in the RFP process required the department to have to go out to rebid for this project, delaying it, and leaving about $420,000 unspent at year end. Another $780,000 relates to contract services that were encumbered and not yet spent. So even though it shows a $2.3 million savings, about $1.3 million of that will be carried forward into the next year. The last item that we'd like to point out is for the waterfront. And the waterfront ended the year with a $2.5 million surplus. Overall, waterfront revenues are driven by weather and economic conditions, and this was the 4th year of this upward trend with waterfront revenues. The waterfront benefited even more than expected, particularly in slip transfer fees, which were about $650,000 over budget at year end, and cruise ships, which were about $300,000 over. Because of these surpluses, waterfront staff have requested to repay one of their 2 general fund loans with this, which was about $1 million. So this concludes my discussion for general fund and enterprise funds. Included in your packets are several budget adjustments for 4th quarter. Again, we did go over these with the Finance Committee, so we're not going to go through those here, but we'd be happy to answer any questions. And this concludes my report.
Thank you.
Sorry, again, Bob Stamaro. We're going to look at general fund reserves, but starting with the comparison to the multi-year forecast. So Ms. Nemes went over the revenues in relation to budget. Obviously, the original budget, lots of things have changed. So I wanted to show this, how our revenues compared to what our multi-year forecast looked like back in February, March, when we were developing the fiscal year 2016 and 17 two-year plan. So you could see that we are actually below what we were projecting in February, March. In fact, you can see sales taxes, it's italicized at $22.1 million, as Ms. Nemes indicated, because of the 4th quarter number, which came in at about 1.5% relative to what we forecast at 4.5%. That number is about $200,000 less. So that variance is going to be even bigger. But overall, we're really reasonably in line with what our expectations were, maybe a little bit below. So this is a summary of the revenue and expenditure, putting it all together and what that kind of looks like on the bottom line. So going across first, the revenues, you can see what our amended budget and our preliminary results show, and then our favorable variance. In addition to expenditures, same thing, a substantial variance there of $3.5 million after encumbrances. Very unusual. We're looking at the past, and we're typically in the $1.5 to $2 million range in terms of expenditure savings at the end of the year. And as you know, we have this anticipated year-end variance that we budget now as a revenue, and that's supposed to be what we expect to see in expenditure savings, and that number is at $1.2 million. So you can see relative to what we kind of use as a fairly conservative number, $3.4 million is much, much bigger. We didn't anticipate this. Again, a lot of vacancies throughout various departments in the general fund that caused this variance. So going more vertical, going at the second column of numbers to preliminary results, pretty close to final, you can see that on a net basis, we will be adding to overall reserves $3.4 million. Really a big number, bigger than we anticipated. How that's going to be allocated is it's a little tricky because there was some direction given to staff by council in connection with the budget process primarily. But the first thing I want to point out is there was some money that was being held in a revolving loan fund, and this came up when we were looking to lend money to the Housing Authority for a housing project, and we identified some unrestricted general fund monies in this fund that included all the other funding sources like SEMP and CHRPO and things of that nature. And when it came to the attention of the Finance Committee, they said, well, here, we have some money that we could potentially tap into to help close the gap in our reserves. And council agreed and said, let's take that money and transfer it to the general fund. So right off the top, from the $3.4 million, which is part of that, we're going to put all of that amount of $529 into the operating fund reserves per council direction. The rest of it then is going to be split between the operating reserves and the capital reserves. And as part of the strategy that council adopted to close the gap in reserves over 2 years, one of the things it asked us to do was to sort of suspend our policy temporarily, the policy which says that half of our surplus goes to capital, half of it goes to operating reserves, that for 15 and 16 that we would send over 25% only instead of 50% to our capital reserves to help close that gap. So of the remaining portion, $2.2 million is going to go to our operating fund, and then $729 will go to our capital reserves. Still a good number because we're dealing with the big dollars now, and that'll be then programmed in fiscal year 17 when we bring forward a capital budget. So overall, we're going to be adding $2.7 million to operating fund reserves to close the gap. And this next slide shows you what it all means. Again, the policy is driven by what our budget is 25%, 15% for disaster reserves, and 10% for contingency. In total, our reserve requirements are $30.6 million. Based on the favorable results in 15, we ended the year with about $30.5 million in reserves, leaving only about $143,000 short of the target, which is amazing because we were thinking that we were trying to get there in 2 years, and we got there a lot sooner. So I think this is great news. You could see where we were expecting to be about $29 million here when we were developing the budget, but instead we're at $30.5. And this just shows you a graph of the same numbers. This is what the graph you've been seeing for many years now. You can see that we are finally just about there. Again, these numbers are preliminary, so they can go up or down a couple 100,000, but I think from a practical perspective, we're kind of there. But certainly by the end of 16, short of any major economic downturn, we're going to get there. And so that concludes our report.
That's great news.
Yeah.
That's on everyone's part, both on revenues, but also good strategy and budget strategy and keeping the expenses down. Some of it in our control, some of it not so much, right, depending on vacancies, but still, that's great news. Any questions? I do have one public comment.
Just one comment. I wanted to point out that, so Ms. Tomaszewski pointed out the schedule of adjustments, so we're not going to go over those, but one of those items is different than what we presented today. So you'll see the very first item which transfers that capital amount to the capital fund. In the schedule, it's something about $800,000. The real number based on final or more recent results is $721. So we just wanted to note that the adjustment that we'll be making is consistent with what we presented to you on the PowerPoint, not what's on your attachment. But other than that, that concludes our report.
Okay. Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Welcome to Ms. Tomaszewski. So I was sitting here having a glimmer of hope that maybe we will be able to save enough for a new police building. What's the number on that again, Does anyone have it right off the top of their head?
60 million, I think.
Madam
60
Mayor,
million?
it's $60 to $70 million, and I think it's very unrealistic to think that we'd be able to save that money out of the operating budget to
Or
fund
some
a-
of it,
fund an item
and then
like
go
that.
for a bond, maybe, right? I mean, I understand that, right? I'm just saying, all these
Always
numbers
hope.
are so healthy. I just wanted to broach the subject. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Brandon Morse.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, forgive my ignorance. I'm not an economist. I'm a law scholar. So I just had a few questions about the numbers here. It looks like the projected number for the Santa Barbara Police Department was about 32.1% of the budget. It ended up being about 32.2% of the budget. Whenever you add that to the projected budget of the City Attorney's Office, you get about 3.5% projected with an actual about 4.2% of the budget. So we're looking at well over 33% of our budget that's going towards policing and litigation. And, you know, it's funny, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces of ongoing litigation where the city is the defendant here. There's something that's way off here, way off. We really need to reanalyze our policies, specifically with the police department. I think that it's interesting that they say that the revenue is down because we don't have enough officers on the street, even though we're putting up more money in the police department than we are any other aspect of our budget. So what that tells me is that their only real job is to generate revenue here in the city, and they're not doing their jobs if we don't have enough. Anyways, whenever you have police officers that are battering civilians, whenever you have more people getting shot by the police in 2013 than were killed by civilians, this is definitely something that needs to be looked at, needs to be analyzed, and your responsibility is to protect us and to have oversight of the police department, not to endlessly fund, you know, whatever they want. What was it? $60 to $70 million on a new police station? You guys were talking about a grant to put a fence around the current police station. Do we really need to waste our money on that? I don't think so.
Okay, it's back to the council. Mr. Hart?
Yeah, I just want to congratulate. Oops, I don't think I get that. I just want to congratulate staff for the new information about meeting the revenues and the reserve requirements. It's really great news. It's excellent. We're way ahead of schedule, and I think this begins to build a great case, I think, for moving forward and addressing some of the capital needs that we're talking about by, you know, getting our fiscal house in order. So I think that's worth noting. And I would just make a motion to approve the proposed adjustments to the fiscal year budget as detailed in this report.
Okay, moved by Hart, second by Hotchkiss. Any other comments or questions?
And also to accept the interim financial statement.
And you want to add to the interim financial accept the interim financial statements in your motion as well. Okay. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Great, that's unanimous. Thank you. All right, move on to item number 15. Thank you very much.
Southern California Edison Reliability Project Update.
Great. Well, this was something I know we asked for 6 months ago or so when you were here before, and welcome back. Kind of timely. We had a little blackout on Friday, so when I got those texts, I'm like, well, great, we can ask on Tuesday what happened. So I imagine that's part of your presentation, but really welcome back, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. And if you can introduce yourself as well, that would be great. Make sure the light is green on your mic there. There you go.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Rondi Guthrie, Local Public Affairs Region Manager with Southern California Edison. And I also have Alicia Piatto, the District Manager for our Santa Barbara Service Center, here as well. Yes, thank you for inviting us back today to give an update on our efforts to enhance reliability in downtown Santa Barbara. Our presentation today will show you the work we have completed so far in 2015, the work we hope to accomplish by the end of this year and throughout 2016, and a more long-term plan to upgrade and modernize the electrical system serving the downtown area. You will see a great deal has been accomplished, but there is still much left to do. You can be assured that our senior leadership has made this work a top priority, and we are doing everything we can to identify and execute the work as quickly as possible. You will also see that the proposed long-term plans for downtown consist of recabling many of the downtown circuits and will require extensive civil work. which equates to significant traffic impacts and planned maintenance outages in the downtown area. We will continue to work closely with the city and the business community as this project advances to ensure an open line of communication. We will continue to outreach to the business community, the city, the media, and the public at large to keep everyone abreast of project developments. While this project will result in some inconveniences and disruptions to the downtown community, we believe it is the right thing to do to enhance reliability, minimize the durations of outages when they do happen, and provide a more holistic approach to upgrading and modernizing the system. I will now turn it over to Alicia Piatto to discuss some of the specifics of the projects we have completed and share our long-term plan.
Thank you, Rondi. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here to give you guys a little update on what we've been doing with the Downtown Reliability Project. I'm also going to talk to you guys a little bit about our substation projects and where we are with those. I will be disclosing what our unplanned outages, our emergent outages have looked like in 2014, and we'll be giving you some details on that. And more importantly, we'll be talking about 2 of our 4 options when it comes to the long-term reliability technical options that we have that we're reviewing. And then we'll give you a little insight as to what the technical planning next steps will be, so you get some idea of what that timeline looks like. Okay, so we've started out by further
Could you put the mic closer to you? It's kind of hard to, yeah, there we go. Yeah, thank you very much.
We've started out by further defining the technical scope of the downtown area, just to try and highlight the circuits that we really needed to be focused on. We've narrowed that down to about 8 circuits. 3 of those are on our 16 kV circuit substations, and the rest of them are on the 4 kV. We're narrowing the scope down to the downtown area, which is between Mission and Gutierrez and De La Vina and to Nepal. So that area for us encompasses about 38 miles of cable and wire and an endless amount of structures, transformers, switches, and poles. So what have we done in 2015 to try and improve our reliability? We have highlighted very immediate projects that we could be working on, and the ones I'm going to be talking about are the ones that we have completed to date and the ones that we still have pending. So in 2015, we have done some vault replacements. We have actually put one of our substations back in service out of the Modoc substation. We've created some circuit ties between the Milpas and the Duffer. We've also done some inspections on both our Milpas circuits and our Padre circuits. That encompass 39 structures on Milpas and 61 structures on the Padre. And we've created 2 additional circuit ties to help with reliability, as well as replacing some switches. So those are all identified in an SCE dedicated web page that we've had on the SCE portal for anybody to look at. We provide timely updates on those. What we currently have in progress, this is defined as already technically designed and ready to schedule, is we have our Santa Barbara substation project, which is to replace the transformers in that substation. That's targeted to be completed by the end of the year. We have some automation. We call it our fault indicator project, and that is also targeted to be completed in 2015, and that encompasses 15 different locations that are not yet on the map, but will be by the end of the week. We are continuing to complete our transformer loading management inspections, and those are targeted to be completed first quarter of 2016. We are also in the process of identifying and inspecting some what we call critical radials to find out what the loading actually looks like on the transformers and the secondaries and the service lines. And that's also targeted to be completed in 2016. We are identifying and getting ready to actually outsource the integrity inspection of 135 structures. That actually involves going into each of the structures and looking to see what the integrity looks like of those primarily vaults. And that's, again, targeted for starting in 2016 quarter 1. We are also scheduling the replacement of 3 transformers. They are all vaulted transformers, and those are scheduled to be completed by the end of the year. And we are continuing our vegetation management program. That's an ongoing program for us. Okay. On the substation front, we are continuing to do our general maintenance as well as have some major substation infrastructure replacement projects scheduled and ready to go. As I stated, we are going to be replacing 2 of the transformers at the substation by the end of the year, and we are scheduled to replace our CBs on the 16 kV and the 4 kV by the year 2019. Our general maintenance details that we conduct in that substation are we conduct circuit breaker reviews. We actually do 3 of them. We do annual inspections and detailed inspections on the 4th year of installation and the 8th year of installation. The 4 kV, 16 kV, and 66 kV CVs have all been detailed inspection or are scheduled to be completed by the end of this year. The transformers receive an inspection, an oil sample, and a chemical analysis every 2 years, and we do a hot wash of the insulators on an annual basis. Okay. So in the spirit of disclosure, these are the outages that we've had, all unplanned, emergent, in 2015. So I'll go into them with a little detail. In January 15th of this year, we had a interruption on the Padre circuit. It was a cable failure. We were out for 4 hours. Our outage time was at 6:39 p.m. We restored and had all load up, part load up by 6:58 p.m. On 2/17, about a month later, on the same circuit, we had a switch that actually failed. That one was a little more lengthy. It involved a lot of repairing of cable as well. That one took us 26 hours to actually repair. Time of outage was 1:19 a.m., and we had part load up through switching fairly soon. We had it up probably within the next 2 or 3 minutes we had that up. But it did take us 26 hours to actually complete the whole project. We were pretty quiet until July 17th. Again, on the Padre circuit, we had a transformer that failed. That was catastrophic. That one took us 23 hours to actually complete all load up. It went out at 5:14 a.m., and we had part load up by about 5:18 through automation. And most recently, the one that you would like to talk about probably is the one that occurred on Friday. That was on 9/11. That one was actually on the Duffer 16 kV circuit. We had some blown taps, basically equipment. The duration of that outage was 3 hours. And primarily the cause of the outage was due to us rolling load from one substation to another substation due to the heat and the loading. Okay.
Actually, I have a question on that last one. So the duration of that last Friday's outage was 3 hours, and it looks like it took about 3 hours to get a response after the outage occurred. So am I reading that correctly? Outage time 7:58 p.m. and the response was 11:09 p.m. So that's about 3 hours later. 3 hours and 10 minutes or so, or 20 minutes.
Yeah, the SC response is all load up. We missed that piece on the slide, but we had all the load up by 11:09 p.m.
So it's the initial.
Our response time for that one, we actually responded and had part lights up within about 5 minutes due to some switching.
Okay. That's a very different story than what's up on the screen. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's missing a bit of information there. Okay. So our long-term reliability improvement plan. Currently, there are 4 options that are under technical review in our engineering department. I'm going to discuss 2 of them with you, and the reason I've chosen these 2 is because they have the highest degree of impact, both to the circuits by replacing the highest volume of equipment, but they also have the highest impact to disturbances in the city, meaning we would have a lot of planned outages and there would be a lot of encroachments on the streets, trenching, road closures, lane closures, installation of new equipment. So it's got a lot of impact to the city. So that's why I'm choosing these to go through. So again, there are what we call option A and option B. So option A, in a very high level, encompasses recabling 3 of our circuits. It would be the Milpas, the Padre, and the Turnpike, or using the Turnpike. It would also include partially removing most of the 4 kV out of the downtown area. The reason for doing that is to allow us to To use some of those structures, the space in those structures, by removing the cable, we could bring in, new cable and be able to minimize the amount of trenching and the amount of vaults that we would actually be installing. In option B, it is more robust, and it involves, again, cabling the same circuits, recabling, but at this time there would be no 4 kV circuit removal, which means there would be a lot more conduit work and a lot more vaults to be installed, so a lot more disruption to the streets. Okay, so for all options, they're going to address the infrastructure in the downtown Santa Barbara by improving the structure and electrical capacity, replacing assets, and increasing operability. They would increase the number of circuit ties and switching capability, and it should result in a significant reliability benefit to the area. All the solutions are intended to prevent frequency of outages and mitigate the impacts of outages that cannot be avoided, because we will have outages even after we do all this. Can't guarantee 100%. Okay, so we'll give you just a little visual. It's very high level. So in option A, again, this is recabling and impacting 3 of our circuits. Again, this is partially removing the 4 kV circuits in the downtown area. The highlighted area is the area we would be working in. It would entail us replacing a little over 19,000 feet of cable, adding 36 more switches, adding or replacing, and adding or replacing 28 more transformers. Okay. On the civil, for the same option, it would entail us boring or trenching the streets about 1,650 feet. Is what we estimate, and those are all depicted for you where it says new conduit in the kind of pink color there, and even some areas in the upgrade conduit. So we would be impacting those areas. We would be installing new conduit for approximately 16,178 feet of new 5-inch conduit, and we would be replacing 19 vaults in place. So these are the same vaults we have out there, but we would be replacing them, as well as adding another 7 structures for pad-mounted equipment. Okay. So option B, again, is a little more robust. Again, we would be working on the same circuits. In this scenario, remember, there would be no 4 kV removal, and so that would mean we would require about 51,446 feet of cable to be replaced, adding or replacing 41 switches, and replacing or adding 264 transformers, because we would be including the radials in this one. So again, it is the highlighted area. On the civil portion, it would be in the general area, but there would be a lot more civil work required. In this case, again, it'd be more trenching, 1,650 feet. It would require the installation of mainline conduits to the tune of about 28,629 feet, and another 21,306 feet of conduits to address all the radials in the area. It would require us to install more vaults. Some would be a replacement in place, and some would be brand new, and some pad-mounted equipment as well. And what's next? In order to come up to a final solution, this is pretty much our timeline. We are at the point of deciding which option we would go with. And I'm not going to go through all this here, but some pivotal times that we would need to engage with the city would be at the point that we reach a red line review. So this is when the base maps have been completed, all of the surveying has been done. We actually have a red line to show you before we get ready to even bid it out or anything. This would be the time to really talk about how do we phase the job, what does it look like, are these good locations for the structures that we're proposing. Another point would be at the time that we're ready to do the civil job walk. And this is ideally targeted for about Q3 of 2016. And when we get to the point where we're actually digging the streets, when we start performing the potholing, which ideally, again, is Q4 of 2016, and we would be ready for final design, getting ready to everybody to approve the design before we start putting shovels in the ground around Q1 of 2017. Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Hotchkiss.
It's not real clear to me who's choosing between option A and option B, and what are the criteria?
So Southern California Edison engineers would be choosing which option would be best, as well as the sponsors of the project, which would be our upper management, VPs that would get to decide that. And really the criteria would be, do we want to address just the main line portion of the circuit, or do we also want to address the radials? So we'd have to do a little bit more study, and what is the community also willing to work with us on? This would be a long-term project, a lot of impact for a long time.
So when you say community work with you mean dug up streets, essentially?
Yeah, absolutely.
So option B is obviously more, as you point out, robust.
Yes.
And going to provide greater security insofar as our power is concerned, correct? Well, why would it be more robust if it doesn't provide greater security?
It addresses more of the infrastructure. So not only the mainline portion, but also the radials. So in option A, we are only looking at just the mainline portion. The radials would continue to be on a maintenance schedule, and we would catch them as we need to. In option B, we're looking to address all of the infrastructure, radials and mainline.
And you're going to bring those or make the city a part of that discussion?
Yes, at the time that we actually narrow down which of the exact options we're going to look at, yes, we have a point here where we would review those designs with you.
Mr. Casey, is that something that comes to the council, or we do that at the staff level?
Public Works, no?
Generally at the staff level, but I would like to continue to have updates in front of the full council and also be able to engage the business community as well.
Yeah, thank you.
To be clear with what you just said, you said the city staff input would come before or after you choose option A or B?
It would come at the time that we do our scope, which would be, according to this, we'd be looking at about between Q1 and Q2 of 2016.
Okay, I'm still not sure I'm not sure what the answer to my question is. So will Southern California Edison make the decision first before coming to city staff for feedback on whether you're going through option A or option B?
Yes,
or you're going to get city feedback first and then decide whether to go to option A or option B?
No, Edison would make the final decision on which plan we actually present to you.
I still understand that part, that you'll
Okay.
make the final decision. My question is, when does the feedback from city staff occur, before or after you make the final decision?
It would occur after we've made the final decision.
So what would the feedback from city staff be to at that point if you've already made the decision?
Ideally, it would be the phasing of the project. Is this a 3 to 5 year project? Is this a 5 to 10 year project?
And is there any possibility that city staff could give Southern California Edison feedback on the benefits and pros and cons of both option A and option B before you make a final decision on which option to choose?
Yes, that would be acceptable. We'd have to make some time to meet with you.
Okay, I have a feeling we would want to do that, so, yeah. Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Following up on the mayor's question then, at one time you spoke about a budget or set aside. I think the number was $12 million, something along those lines. But it seems like both of these options have different budget components to them.
Yes, they do.
What does the number we talked about before have anything to do with this future plan, or is that the work you're doing today for this area?
The $12 million is the work we're doing today, and
Okay.
the design study for this also is included in this, but the actual execution of either one of these options, we don't have those final numbers yet.
Right.
So that
and
would be over and above the $12 million.
And then you have to go back to the PUC to get the approval for the, or how do you get to where, I mean, you have plug numbers, obviously, for both option A and option B once they're fleshed out.
Yeah.
And then what are we looking at as far as getting to that number where you can say, we're doing this, let's go?
Yeah, no, we do not need to go to the PUC to get
Okay.
the money. It's all internal approvals.
A couple of quick questions on what you would do now. You talked about the various vaults and replacing vaults and transformers. And at one point in time, we also talked about the possibility or the simplicity of having above ground vaults as opposed to underground vaults. Is that something that's going to be considered and talked about? Obviously, there's going to be city concerns as well.
Yeah.
But it seems like from a maintenance response time, that would make a big difference.
Yeah.
Is that part of the discussion?
Yeah, so we are going to take advantage of looking for every possible way to put pad-mounted equipment. In our just topology and our review so far, what we just can't seem to find in this general area locations that are adequate for pad-mounted equipment.
But that might be a really good time for input from city staff and, of course, council. One of the things that has been so far for planned outages, a bone of contention amongst the business community has been the outage notification. There seems like there's been some inconsistencies and some confusion over some of them. Is there a plan to address that a little more clearly than has been done before? Or is there a way to do that? Because I know you also have other commitments and emergencies that come up in other places.
Yeah, we do already have a process for how we
Right.
notify our customers. It's already already built into our scheduling of the work. We could go back and take a look and refine
It hasn't
a little bit
always
more.
worked 100%. As I'm sure Ms. Guthrie could attest to from the phone calls she's gotten.
Yeah.
And I will just add, we did have some of our business customer division representatives out actually canvassing the streets in downtown Santa Barbara to try to get very localized contact information for the folks, in those buildings, because our notifications go to the customer of record. So if somebody's leasing a space in a building and the property management company's in Texas, that notification is going there. And we have to responsibly get, permission from that customer of record to be able to correspond with the actual tenant there. So we have worked diligently to try to get as much of that on the ground contact information for our small businesses, much like we do with our large assigned customers, where Edison is moving forward with proactive notification to our small businesses and eventually residential as well.
I'm sure the downtown organization and the chamber would be willing partners in that.
Absolutely, and they have been.
Two last quick questions, if I may. You went back to the transformers, the different ones that have failed. There was one, I'll just call it the Dargan's one because it seemed to be back behind that building. I think that failed 3 separate times within the last year, if I've got that right, or if it was the same one or not. Is there, has it been replaced? Is it some other kind of issue that we're not aware of? Because it seems like that was kind of happening a lot.
Yeah, so that particular transformer had not failed before. That another transformer on the same radial had failed, but not that one.
Okay.
So part of one of the plans that I showed you is we are going out and actually doing inspections of those transformers, first of all, to make sure that the loading is adequate, and going beyond that and looking at our service wires and our secondaries to see if we need to upgrade those as well.
And I know that we're talking about transfer and circuitry, but is talk of a peaker plant, either rebuilding the one we do have or enhancing or doing another one, is that part of the big picture? Is this a completely different subject from that?
It is different than our downtown distribution work that we are doing, but we certainly have some larger, what we call reliability projects on our sub-transmission line that serves this area, and also on looking to procure, generation in this area.
Thank you.
You still have more of your presentation, correct?
You have mostly seen this slide. This was our last slide, our communication plan. I did just want to highlight, we have had very regular ongoing meetings with city public works staff on the work we're doing. We've been able, I think, to coordinate very well with them and come up with really a permitting matrix. So we know on our side and on your side exactly what we're doing and what permits we need to do this work. And I did want to say on the timeline presented here, certainly we would engage city staff and city council throughout this process, but we would certainly plug in some, outreach to the community and hold an open house and, do those types of things to let the community know what we're doing as well.
Great. In terms of Q1, Q2, Q1 is fiscal year July, right? Or is it calendar year?
They're calendar years.
Actually, so can you go back to that timeline? So the arrow down 2016 Q. So okay, so we are currently in 2015 Q3. Is that what? Okay, so we're not looking at anything happening in terms of construction until 2017 under this timeline. Is that correct?
That would be correct in this timeline. That could be moved up depending on sponsorship within our company and how quickly they want us to get out there and get this stuff fully designed.
Sponsorship meaning more money sooner? Is that what you mean by sponsorship?
Meaning refocus priorities to make sure that we have the right people working on this and designing it.
Okay.
But even with all of that, and believe you me, we've got about 5 engineers working on this. We still have to wait until we get at least to get our base maps, which means actually surveying all of the streets and seeing what do we really have to work with down on the street.
Okay. Okay, we do have a public comment speaker slip, but go ahead, Mr. Hart. Did you want to?
I'll just wait.
Okay. Why don't we go to Jerry Brown, and can you bring any state money with you, if you can?
I'm the other Jerry Brown.
PhD. Oh, right. Okay. Thank you very much.
I'd like to say my name's Jerry Brown. I'm opposed to fracking. I just want to get that on the record. These are for the council members. Thank you for the council on the record. I'm sorry I didn't bring any additional, but a few people need
You need to speak to us, not the whole crowd here, okay? If you can, yeah, there we go.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
My name is Dr. Jerry Brown. I'm the director of the Safe Energy Project for the World Business Academy. I'd like to read just 3 paragraphs from this letter that is in the packet that you have and ask that the letter be either inserted or read into the record. One of the things that you have in the packet, let me say essentially that recabilization is not reliability. We are at the end of a long extension cord, and if that extension cord gets compromised because of the compromised footings of the high voltage towers that brings the electricity down this extension cord to Santa Barbara from the Edison natural gas plants, then we will not have electricity, according to Edison's own testimony. We are involved before the CPUC in proceedings around Moore Park, where we have provided extensive documentation of an alternative plan to Edison's proposal. One of their ideas for additional generation is to restart the old natural gas peaker plant at Elwood. If the line goes down, according to Edison testimony, that plant will run 24/7 and will exceed all of its environmental permits. This is one of the towers that is compromised. And let me read to you briefly from our letter, just 3 paragraphs. Thank you for your concerns regarding the current state of Santa Barbara's energy system. The World Business Academy has studied local energy issues closely, and we believe the situation may be worse than you think. Due to our reliance on a single transmission energy source, we are all at the risk of a prolonged and widespread blackout that could be caused by something as benign as a series of rainstorms, worse El Nino, or more severe natural disasters such as wildfires or earthquakes. Paragraph 4, as many of you know, our area relies on a set of high-voltage transmission lines.
You're going to have to wind up, please.
For at least 2/3 of electricity. Edison has indicated that if its lines go down, we will be without power. We would like to have the opportunity to make a presentation on our findings before the Commission of what we've submitted to the Public Service Commission, and also to request that the city ask for inspection of these transmission lines on which it relies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. It's to the council. Mr. Hart.
Could you comment on these photographs of the transmission tower supports? These look pretty ominous. This is the first time you've seen this?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Hart, yes, I haven't seen the photos in front of you. What I will say to Mr. Brown's comments is we do have a project in place called the Santa Barbara County Reliability Project to upgrade our 66 kV line to be able to handle additional load should those 220 kV lines go down. The reasons those lines would go down would be due to natural disaster, not due to any aging infrastructure or issues to that regard. We have identified, we know there's fires in that area, there's mudslides, and that there could be potential floods and mudslides in that area. And it's in very difficult terrain to access. So that's why that project has been identified and something that we are hoping to get done. We're hoping to get a final certified EIR by late this year, next year, to begin construction on that sometime in 2016.
I think the concern folks in the community have is whether this is going to survive a bad El Nino rainstorm. And it seems to me like these are the towers that bring all the power to the South Coast. And just intuitively, I'm not an engineer. I don't know what I'm talking about, frankly. But and this is really difficult for us to respond effectively to when we get just a PowerPoint presentation without even having a copy of it here and getting anything in advance. And maybe something to our staff, the next time we do this, it'd probably be helpful to have more information before, because it's just really difficult to respond to this. And folks have really serious concerns about this. So, intuitively, to me, this would be a 20-foot deep caisson, to hold up the power transmission lines that bring power to the South Coast. It's not, I don't think, because it looks like that support is just right there ending. And so, a plan to replace that in a couple of years is a good thing, but it just doesn't feel adequate to what we may be potentially facing with this year with this extraordinary El Nino that folks are talking about. So, what would happen? What do you have in place to plan to avoid catastrophic failure of this from truly a natural disaster?
I think due to the location of the towers, there are things that are out of our control. I mean, they are in a backcountry, rough terrain. Like I said, we have, transmission engineers and folks working on these projects and maintaining those lines, maintaining those towers. So it is not an issue of aging infrastructure that would take those lines down. It would be a natural disaster. As mentioned, that is really out of our control. But having said that, like I said, we do have, and it has been before the PUC for many years, the upgrading of our 66 kV line to keep the lights on here in Santa Barbara should those lines go down due to natural disaster.
Okay, let me take a second run at this. To me, this would kind of scream that this needs to be fixed. And maybe it should have been fixed a while ago. And I don't know whether you perceive that it should be fixed. And this is something that, somebody else didn't give you approvals to do sooner or not. But it's just feeling disproportionate to threat. I understand doing the proactive work about preventing the outages. But, something like this that would go down that would effectively, wouldn't this cut our power for multiple weeks for them to be able to get back for the whole South Coast, or am I not understanding this right?
It's difficult to give an exact timeline on how long power would be out. When we had some of the fires before, it was actually surprisingly short amount of time that power was out. We were able to restore power and shift load around to keep power up. So it's difficult to say, depending on the circumstance, exactly how long those lines would be down. But we are doing everything we can in both maintaining our existing infrastructure and upgrading our existing infrastructure to, keep the lights on up here in Santa Barbara.
Okay.
And I apologize. I haven't seen those photos, so I could not tell you
that's
where
fair enough.
that
You haven't
is,
seen the
or
photos.
I could
Okay.
get our transmission folks to take a look. And
I guess that's
what
I'm asking is, what do you do to inspect to make sure that this is okay? And do you inspect? Is there a record? This is sort of like what happened with the oil spill and the pipeline. There's a regulatory regime that says these pipelines are being tested. Everybody thinks it's all okay, and all of a sudden it's not. And so this opportunity to have this dialogue presents the public the opportunity to ask these questions, like, are we going to be okay? Because it's inconvenient, and it's a big impact on the business community, and it's a problem when the power goes out for 3 hours or a day. But it's really potentially catastrophic if this were to happen. And it does not, from my regular citizen eyes, this looks like a much bigger problem than what we're talking about with the presentation. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But I just want to be reassured that you have an inspection regime. This isn't as unsafe as it looks like. It was inspected 6 months ago. The reason it doesn't have a caisson is because it doesn't need a caisson, although I find that hard to believe. Why weren't caissons installed? I mean, we literally had a pool in front of this council that had, probably I don't even know how much, an incredibly expensive network of 30-foot deep caissons to hold up a single pool in a residential neighborhood on the Mesa. And so the idea that these don't have that is kind of incredulous to me. So I think there's a question in there somewhere. Maybe explain to me more about why this is not really a problem?
So I'll address it. So all of our assets do have a maintenance schedule, depending on the type of asset it is and what kind of requirement we have through GO 165. We have maintenance schedules for everything that we have. I can't speak to this particular picture because I don't know where this is, but we are going to take this and go back to our transmission department and find out, is this us? If it is, what does our maintenance schedule look like? We may, if it is us, we may already have a work order to go out and replace it.
Okay, well, let's just do that. Let's just get us some additional information about the specifics about this. I mean, I think what the point that the folks in the community are making is that these transmission lines are very, very vulnerable. We have a potentially extraordinary storm event season coming up, and we want to make sure that we're protected from anything like that. And just some kind of reassurance, some kind of additional information about that would be really helpful. So, thank you.
Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Edison representatives, for your presentation today. And this is now, I think, the third or fourth presentation that I've had the privilege of hearing from Edison as in response to a series of outages that have occurred. And I want to, I've been sort of processing this as we've gone from presentation to presentation to try and place a perspective around it for the benefit of our city. And Edison is a public, it has a franchise, is a public utility, is a public-private partnership. I mean, this is different than even the oil companies, which are out there doing their thing to deliver us energy, but doing it on a competitive basis, not on a utility basis. But Edison is our energy provider here. And what I'm missing with this, and I hearken back even to when I started in city government, which was in the water department, where we did not know how many miles of pipe we had. We didn't know how old the pipe was. We did not know so many things. And over the last 30 years, the planning has opened up. The transparency has opened up so that we're studying, we have a good feeling about the overview, and then the particulars we're hearing year to year to year about, we're replacing this piece because it's the oldest and it's the most corroded and so forth. What we heard today was a focus on a piece of the puzzle, which we don't even know how big the puzzle is. We don't know how old the puzzle is. We don't know where the worst problems are because we don't have an overall picture of what our situation is. And that concerns me. I don't even, do we have, for example, do we have a staff member, do we have staff that understands the whole city power system? Okay. So it seems to me that's a problem. That's a problem that we should be, as partners, we should, there should be this kind of somehow a picture that we all are working on together saying, this is our overall system. How many poles are there? How many, you were talking about feet of wire. How many feet of wire do we have? And then how old should wire be while it's replaced? And these are the kinds of things that we talk about in planning where everybody understands the situation. Mr. Hart was, we got this, I've seen these pictures of this power line, power pole in the back country, which obviously is one of our weakest places. But we really need to have an overall picture of where we are and how old our system is and where we need to spend money. And we don't have that. And it would be a wish, it's a wish for me that we get on that trajectory of establishing an overall plan where we understand what we've got, what our biggest weaknesses are, and that we start to address them. We're talking about the downtown system, and that's just one area where we have this crazy mix of old and new, and that we're trying to keep it dependable. And of course, it's all changing with time as we need, as our energy needs change. So bear with me, colleagues, but I think we're missing an overall plan here, and we're missing transparency that would optimize the partnership between government and our private partner here to have a great system that's dependable and we can look forward to in the future. the particular, Mr. Rouse brought the point up about peaker plants, generation. It's one of the key issues here, which I know, again, Mike, and we've spoken, we've dialogued with our Edison colleagues here before. It's a problem. It's a serious problem on the South Coast. We do not have backup generation here, and we need to work on this together to improve it. Dr. Brown, I know, is looking for more resiliency with more solar and some other, a more eco approach, which I certainly endorse as well. But it's something that all of us need to get behind. But we don't have an overall picture. Here we have our own city staff doesn't understand the full picture of our power system in our city. So we've got some real deficits here that we need to upgrade, and I hope we find a way to do that over time. I think it's a real, as I say, it's a real deficit, and this downtown problem may be helping us to get on track with this. To go, okay, we got a problem. Let's start developing a plan so that we're taking care of this for ourselves and for our children and grandchildren.
Well, I think it's clear that we want to continue the dialogue, and I think if maybe come back again, was it 6 months since last time, or 3, 4, whatever the time period, 2 to 3 times a year, or maybe at key moments, I'll let you work that out with staff and have a public hearing. And I agree with Mr. Hart that having the information ahead of time so the public can also see what it is that you want to just generally present, and then have the details here so we can have a more robust dialogue about that would be very helpful. I do think, given that you're looking at basically a 15-plus month period before shovel hits the ground anywhere, lot of work between now and then, but I would think would help Southern California Edison to get feedback from staff about weighing your options. Because if you do decide, for example, that the more robust option is the better one, that's going to have more of an impact on the residents and business owners nearby, it'd be best for us to get buy-in into why. And if you just say we're going with option B because we say so, I just don't see that being as helpful, or as the communication lines could break down that way. And so let's just avoid that from happening, and communication's good. And then finally, considering there's a lot of time between today and when we finally get to the process of what you have here, never mind the bigger, huge picture, or behind, into the back country and so forth. One thing you didn't mention, I guess, and maybe you could ask about it, is I know we've talked about staffing before, because especially as Mr. Rouse was saying, when there's an underground transformer that's smoking or there's a problem, you have to have, and rightfully so, 2 people there who are trained, not one of our firefighters, but one of your own staff there to be able to assess and then fix whatever's necessary. I don't know if, I'll bring it up. We sent a letter. There was a close call, Saturday fiesta. Very, very close call with a transformer, and thank goodness there was not a power outage, but it came close. And wow, that would have been really quite a situation if that were to occur. And knowing that there's someone close by on a Saturday, if something were to go wrong, instead of just waiting for someone to show up just to do basic work, is something I know we all want to know that it is occurring. So I know it is a staffing issue, but perhaps you can give us a little bit of an update, if any, that you have, but what kind of assurances we can get to make sure that if and when those occurrences, unplanned occurrences happen, that we can address them immediately and not have to wait for someone to come from Canoga Park or from Thousand Oaks or wherever to get here. So maybe you can address that, please.
Sure. So on the greater scale, at Southern Cal Edison, we have a labor strategy focus group right now that's put together to try and attract a lot of the craft jobs, linemen, groundmen, foremen, that type of stuff. They're very competitive jobs, meaning there's more jobs than there are people that do this right now. So we do have a team put together to try and figure out how do we incentivize, what is it that we can do to bring, more talent to SCE. We also continue to procure contracts with vendors, contractors that actually perform the work, so that we have more people on call, and we can, lean on those resources as well. And we have an apprenticeship program that's very robust, so we're actually hiring at least two individuals through an apprenticeship every single year for every single district, and we're even thinking of increasing that. But again, it's an apprenticeship, a three-year apprenticeship. We're also looking at your calendar. Specifically here, we look at the calendar of events, and we try and identify resources that we could have on standby or working on another job that they could actually pull off and be available if anything happens. So we're trying to do that, and that was one of the reasons we probably were around Fiesta. We did have those crews available. It wasn't a transformer; it was actually a feeder to an individual, customer. But yes, it was definitely overloaded cable. So those are some of the things. We also, are working within the union contract and trying to figure out how do we incorporate shift work into the contract that we already have.
Great. Well, perhaps if that could be also part of your update next time you come, that would be helpful as well. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, thank you again for being here, and to be continued, but I know people are paying very close attention to this very important item. Thank you very much. Okay, let's just keep moving on to item number 16.
Request from Montecito Water District for regional use of the Charles A. Meyer desalination plant.
Okay, Ms. Bjork, and I understand President Schalberg is here, and Board Member Charles Newman, thank you for your patience and for being here today, and I believe others as well. So, Ms. Bjork.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of Council. I'm Rebecca Bjork, Public Works Director, and I'm here today to talk about the potential for possible regional use of the desalination plant, and specifically a request by the Montecito Water District for entering into discussions to talk about the potential for the plant to supply water to that district. By way of background, the desalination plant, as I think you're all very well aware at this point, is a part of the city's long-term water supply plan. And we do have a permit that contemplates 4 modes of operation. During this past couple of years, we've been working very hard to ensure that we could reactivate the plant for the purposes of meeting the city's emergency needs during the current severe drought. We have initiated investigations and conversations with our regulators to confirm and affirm our permits, but our discussions were really around the proposed use by the city for drought response, which is how we had contemplated and maintained that plant. As a result, when we received a request from Montecito to discuss participating in the water supply that's represented by the desal plant, we requested that they inquire of the regulators as to the regulator position of the use of the plant for those purposes, because our conversations really had pertained to the city's use. So we have gotten, Montecito did make those inquiries, and we have gotten responses. The response from the Coastal Commission is a letter stating that their review is that it's valid as long as we are operating within the terms of the conditions of operation that are within our existing permit, that it would be a valid use. But without a specific proposal, it's hard for them to evaluate. So when we had a specific proposal, they would need to reevaluate for consistency. The Regional Water Quality Board has not responded in writing so far, but conversations with staff have indicated that they don't see any barriers or problems to operating the plant. The permit doesn't prevent the operation of the plant. It specifies conditions on discharge, not so much conditions on operations. So those 2 barriers or those 2 issues were issues of concern that we wanted resolved before we came to council. Now that those questions have been answered, we are here really to ask for direction on what council would like us to do on this issue. We don't have anything to report, as we have not initiated any kind of conversations about this issue. So we don't know how much water Montecito needs, when they would need that water, how a proposal would even be initiated. We would like to investigate the intersection of interests between what Montecito is interested in and how that might work in conjunction with city's interest in the plant. We haven't identified a form of transaction, whether it be a contract or a joint powers agreement or another form of agreement, and pricing in other terms. So as you can see, discussions will be very complicated and very technical in nature, but all of those are yet to come. At this point in time, what we're really here is to ask council for direction, to direct staff to send a letter to Montecito to initiate formal discussions regarding the potential for the use of the desal plant, if council so desires. And if so, we would recommend appointing an ad hoc committee to consult with staff on issues related to the use of the desal plant. So with that, if you have any questions, that went too far, then I'd be happy to answer them.
Great.
Or try to
Thank
answer
you.
them.
I don't see any questions here. I do have it's Shakowitz, I'm sorry. I don't know why I said Shelburg. Maybe we'll start there. Why don't you come on up, followed by Charles Newman and then Phil Walker. Welcome.
My name's Dick Shakowitz. I'm president of the Montecito Water District, and we would hope that you'll approve of your staff recommendation so that we can start some talking with you all to see if there is a way that we can somehow participate with what you have on desal. We've looked at our own. We don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to have our pipes and your pipes 2 miles apart running into the ocean and the brine going out at the same area. The cost is much greater for us to have one by ourselves. When's the drought going to end? We're going to have a lot of rain this winter, a little rain, no rain. Is it going to be a short term, or is it going to be, we're going to have 10 years of drought instead of 4 years? None of us really know. But we do know statistically that about every 20 years, big droughts occur. And that's why Lake Cachuma was built. That's why all sorts of things happen at various times. You in the city have excluding the desal plant, you have a big advantage that we don't have. In normal drought times, it's my understanding that you really don't need desal, that you have sufficient groundwater and water from other uses, that it isn't necessary. But when the big drought comes, everybody in the state is in big trouble. Montecito has much less groundwater than you have, so that we can use, even in normal times, we can use water on the desal plant. It's my understanding that the desal plants are best when they are operating all the time. They can be operating at lower amounts, but the advantage that we can give you, if we can reach some agreement with you all, is that we can take water all the time and keep it running so that when the droughts come and the bad times come, there is a facility that can immediately be turned on and it can help everyone. There are an incredible amount of moving parts to all of this. Right now, the capacity, from what I've read, is so much. It can be increased additional amounts. If the drought continues, how much water are you going to need? How much water would you let us have? How is the financing going to work? And we would really love to sit down with your staff and try and see if we can get something that everyone can agree to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Charles Newman?
I have little to add, and the hour's drawing late, so I'll just say 3 things very quickly. First, I was here in July when the council took the leadership and approved the reactivation of the desalination plant. And I applaud you for that wisdom, for that judgment, and for the leadership. As Director Shakowitz expressed, it's our hope that you'll extend that leadership beyond the boundaries of the city to include the Montecito Water District. And as he also said, we offer you the opportunity to be a fair weather, not a fair weather friend, rather, but your friend come rain or shine. So we
Friends
hope,
forever. How's
yes.
that? Yes, there we go. Okay.
I'll
BFFs, okay.
I'll accept that as well. So in the spirit of good humor, we hope that we can proceed and that the staff recommendations will be embraced. We support them, our community and customers support them, and we would appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil Walker?
Good afternoon again once. Excuse me. It's been a long time here without any water. I'm a resident of the East Side. I have numerous neighbors, including my stepson, that work in Montecito. Like Salute Carbajal said, it's in everybody's best interest, especially on the east side of Santa Barbara, to keep Montecito green and prosperous. And I've seen the toll in Montecito, how the drought is affecting the landscape, the environment. It's a big, big concern. Okay, one quick aside, that electric pylon support I saw the picture of, that was state-of-the-art in the 50s and the 60s. If you go by like the San Luis Reservoir, the Gianelli 4-bay power plant, the 220 kV pylons are based actually in water on the same type of supports. So it's nothing out of the ordinary, but it is a big concern and a fairly strong seismic loading. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. It's to the council, so we're looking for some direction in an ad hoc committee. I'll just say up front, I'd like to continue on to be one of the members of that. Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a question for Ms. Bjork. Ms. Bjork, when we talked about the initial phase of refiring up the desal plant, we talked about a standby number just in case all of a sudden the El Nino hit again and we were on El Nino for a number of years in a row. Were the plant to be increased capacity-wise into phases 2 and 3 perhaps, or whatever the capacity is, does that standby number, if we get into another big, long, wet period, does that remain proportionally the same? Does it go up with the capacity of the plant? Is there a way to tell?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, I will need to defer that to Linda Sumansky, who's the principal engineer, who was the lead person responsible for putting together the technical specifications for the project that is currently under construction, and can respond to that question.
So, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, Linda Sumansky, Public Works Engineering. The standby number will stay the same. That will not change whether we increase the amount of water that we can put through the plant or not.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I appreciate that the Montecito District has come forward with this request, and I support opening the conversation. Obviously, Montecito is a partner with the City of Santa Barbara in a variety of water systems here, so I think there are a lot of details to be considered, and I don't think this necessarily will be an easy negotiation, but I certainly support an effort to be made to see if there's a way to develop a partnership on the desal plant. And I would ask as one of your water liaisons that I be part of the subcommittee that participates in this.
Mr. Hart?
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a great opportunity to share interests and initiate these negotiations. I do think they're potentially complicated because there's a lot of different moving parts involved in this, but I'd like to participate. I've been on the desal committee so far, and I'd offer to continue in that role.
Mr. Francisco?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with my colleagues. We have a long-standing relationship with the Montecito Water District, and I see a lot of advantages to a cooperative agreement here, especially for our ratepayers. It would be, at least what I've seen from the preliminary engineering estimates, a considerable reduction in cost per acre foot to have a larger capacity to begin with. So I'm fully in favor of this. I realize that the discussions will be complicated, but I think we can work it out. And I would also like to be on that committee. So
To figure this
thanks
out
very
then.
much.
All right. Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's prudent to open the discussion. I just want to be clear that my residents come first. But I know that we'll have an open and a good negotiation going forward. Thank you.
So just in terms of timing, moving forward, I mean, I imagine, first off, saying that this is an exciting opportunity to have a more regional-wide conversation. It's something I know we've wanted to have there's a lot of implications, a lot of details that we, need to move forward on. And that might take a little while. And what's your sense of timeline? I mean, obviously, if we're looking at the desalination plant being operative about a year from now, and if Montecito can be a part of that when that happens, that I'm sure they would love that. But that, is that.
Madam Mayor, without more specific information from Montecito as to what they're seeking from us and when they would like to have that, it's really hard to answer that question. So, for example, if they would like to receive water, we're expecting to have that next fall, fall of 2016. We would need to know that really quickly so that we could assess whether the capacity we're building right now, whether we think that is sufficient or whether we need to expand it. If, on the other hand, they're looking for a slightly longer time frame, that gives us more time. So we really need to get some very preliminary information from Montecito before we can even begin to put together a framework and a schedule for timing. But clearly, time is of the essence if we need to increase the capacity of that plant in order to meet their needs.
We wouldn't expect to have all the questions answered by in the next 3-4 months. I mean, it's going to take.
I don't know whether it's something that we can phase, whether we can do a preliminary agreement. I mean, we really have not begun the conversation about it because, again, we haven't got a specific request from Montecito. We will be seeking some very specific information to help us frame the conversation and set as rapid a time frame as we think is reasonable.
Okay. Well, we have 4 people interested, and we only can allow 3 people for an ad hoc committee. So we're going to have to figure out how to handle this. You'll back off, Mr. Rouse? Thank you. Okay, we're still only down to 4. I've appreciated working with Council Members Hart and Francisco very much on the last committee we were looking at when we're looking at the desal plant process. This is different, and I think we need a different ad hoc committee. Well, and even though it's similar type of conversations. And I just don't know, really, with Mr. Francisco, with your term coming up, I don't know if that's to keep the continuity going in past January. You've been an invaluable member. Let me just be right up front about that. I'm just trying to think of continuity of membership, and my concern would be we get to a point and January comes around and we'd have to switch around the membership at that point.
No, that's a reasonable point, and I expect to be involved with this discussion in any case. So. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. So if without it being, if it's, I hope, okay, it sounds like if myself, Mr. White, and Mr. Hart could be the 3, and certainly we'll be back here when it comes to anything formal. We'll have all of 7 of us talking about this, of course. So I would entertain a motion, Mr. Rouse.
Move the aforementioned committee.
Of
you, Mr. Hart, and Mr. White.
Okay. All right. Is there a second?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so motion by Rouse, second by Hotchkiss. Anything to the motion? All in favor? Aye. Great. Thank you very much, and really very much appreciate your participation in this. Okay.
Madam Mayor, could
yes,
we just
Mr.
also
Casey.
on the item was item A, direct staff to send the letter. Could we just get a formal motion on that?
Sure. Can we get a motion for that? Item A.
So moved.
Mr. Hart, motion, second by Rouse. All in favor? Aye. All right. Okay. Item 17. This hopefully should be quick. Thank you very much. We look forward to the conversation moving forward.
Council Liaison to the Kachuma Operations and Maintenance Board.
Who's taking this over, Mr. Casey or
I'll say something about it.
Mr. Francisco?
So for the past 5 years, I have very much enjoyed representing the city on the various regional water boards. And as I am approaching my great transition here in January, I wanted to make sure that, especially because of the complexity of some of the issues involved here, that Mr. White, who has expressed an interest in filling a similar role, had ample time to get started with some of these issues. By far, the most complex issues that we're facing right now are with COME, the Kachuma Operation and Maintenance Board. And so I resigned my position, and Mr. White automatically, because of his position as an alternate, became the board member. And I have continued attending the board meetings, and I think this is a productive way to manage this transition. So that's the reasoning behind this.
Great. Well, and again, thank you for your work on a very important issue on the COMB board for sure. Yes, Mr. Casey.
And so, Madam Mayor, we're looking for you to affirm that Councilmember White would be the liaison to the board, but then also to appoint an alternate in case he's unable to attend a meeting.
Okay. And do we have any speaker slips on this item? No. Okay. Mr. Hart?
I just have to comment on a newspaper article that I read about the COMB operations. I appreciate that Councilmember Francisco has been working on our behalf in that regard, but I was troubled, frankly, by this newspaper article that sort of implied, I can't even recall the specifics of the article, but the general point of it was that Councilmember Francisco had resigned from his position on the board and is seeking a job in that agency. And I just... The fact that that's a surprise to me, the fact that I only heard about that through a newspaper article, the fact that Councilmember White, was asked to step in that situation, coupled with what I understand to be very difficult negotiations at the current moment with members of the agency about the viability of the $7 million pumping station that we have contributed financially to have operational, I think puts this in a difficult light, and that there are public perception issues in regards to this. I don't know the facts. Maybe Councilmember Francisco can speak to this, but I just think this is an unfortunate transition. I think what it really speaks to from a policy standpoint is the need for there to be more regular communications from the folks who are appointed by this council to serve on regional boards. We kind of let that go. We have folks go serve in these capacities, and there is no regular communication mechanism when folks are out there doing those things, representing the city, taking that responsibility. I appreciate that Councilmember Francisco did bring back an item for us to discuss, a very important one that we did discuss in closed session, but that's the only time that we've had any kind of communication about what's going on at that board, and this event has occurred. But I don't think it is isolated just to this situation. I think it sort of speaks to a larger issue about the representation of the council on these boards. I know the city of Carpinteria has a regular item on their agenda where the folks who are in those positions report back to the council and bring folks up to speed. I'd like us to think about doing something similar like that. I know we do have the council member liaison reports on our agenda, but I don't think they are structured in a way that encourages that kind of reporting. I think we end up basically telling folks, what we've been doing in terms of events and things like that. So I'd love to hear what other folks think about this, some more structure to that, some more dialogue, so that we would all feel as though we are up to speed with important issues like this without reading about them in the paper.
Okay. Mr. Francisco, your light's on. Did you want to respond?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
So, Mr. Hart, I'd be happy to speak with you about the article you read. It was written by someone who was not present at the meeting and didn't really understand what happened. So I'd be happy to talk with you offline about that sometime. I agree that there's a general problem with the people who are representing City Council on various boards and commissions and getting all the details back to the full council at a level where people can understand it. Part of the reason that we appoint people to these boards and commissions, it's not just to represent the City Council, though it's certainly that, but it's also to develop some expertise in particular areas, recognizing that none of us have the bandwidth to be experts in all of the different areas that the city is focused on. Anything that we can do to improve communications from the people who are representing City Council on these various boards and commissions, I think that's great. But I think we also have to realize that the time and effort necessary to develop that kind of expertise, we're just not going to all be able to share that level. So I think it's an inherent problem.
Just to respond to Mr. Hart, I think I think SB CAG does a good job towards the end of the meeting. There's actually a list of items where we serve on different committees, and it takes a minute or two, at least it's on the agenda, to say what happened at the last meeting. And then if we need a more detailed discussion on it, we can have an agenda item on it. Since they're monthly meetings, it wouldn't happen every week here. But, I think that's just an agenda maintenance issue, maybe under council member committee assignment reports, just list all the, I'm not talking every single liaison, like Architecture Board of Review. That's not but where we actually have a vote on something like SB-CAG or APCD or COMB or CCRB or maybe even the Community Action Commission or some other kind of regional board. So, I mean, I think that's a agenda maintenance item that we could put on, and I think might help some of the transparency and communication issues. But I would agree that we're not necessarily going to get into the nitty-gritty detail of everything that goes on, but it's just more to keep up to date of what's happening. I think that's your point. I still think, Mr. White, if you're interested, you should be the regular member with your expertise in water, and we would ask, I guess, want to see if there's another member willing to be alternate. Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of things. I would like to nominate myself to be the alternate. Second, I agree with Councilmember Hart about reporting back, and I try to report back. I think things that happen at the MTD board are really important, even our youth council, even though it doesn't rise to the occasion of our water supply or that level of importance. And I have enough expertise, I think, to understand complex water supply issues. If that's what was being said here, is that don't report back because we don't have the capacity to understand. Maybe reporting back more regularly and with more detail would bring us along. SB-CAG, Beacon, and the water supply issues should have time and space on our agenda, and usually we do it at the end of the meeting, and we're all a little tired, maybe like now, a little tired, a little hungry, but it is important for these reports back. Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Hotchkiss.
Are we at the point where we're going to nominate
Yes.
an alternate?
Yes.
Well, I'd like to nominate Randy Rouse.
Randy Rouse willing to accept the nomination, or do you have the time for?
Yes, no, I have to decline, but thank you, Mr. Hotchkiss. I do not have the time.
You don't have the time. Okay. Okay. So, are we, Mr. White? You are interested in serving on as the regular member from the council. Okay. So why don't we at least do that first, and then we can do an alternate. So is there a motion to affirm the appointment of Councilmember White as the council liaison to see?
Second.
Moved by Francisco, second by Rouse. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So Ms. Murillo has offered to serve as alternate. Is there another? Yes, Mr. Hart?
I make a motion to appoint.
Okay. That your
Sorry.
light was on. You
There we
were
go.
motioning to.
Appoint Councilmember Murillo as the alternate.
Okay. Is there a second? Is there a second? Okay. Mr. Rouse seconded. Any comments? Okay. So all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Okay. That's 6-1. Hotchkiss opposed. Okay. So that is taken care of, and thank you very much. It's a lot of hard work to do. Do we want a stretch break, or do we want to just go on? Yeah? Thank you, 2-minute council break, whatever that means. So we'll take a real quick break, and we'll be back for item number. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting back to order. If you can read item number 18.
Request from Mayor Schneider and Councilmember Murillo regarding Planned Parenthood healthcare and educational services. Recommendation that Council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara recognizing Planned Parenthood for its important contributions to women's health in the City of Santa Barbara.
Thank you. This is an item brought up by 2 of the 7 of us, and so as protocol, myself and Councilmember Murillo, if we have any opening comments, make it at this time, and then which I'll start and then go to Ms. Murillo. This is actually, I think, an unusual request. It's not normally where we ask the council to actually vote on a resolution for a particular nonprofit. We do that in a variety of ways with ceremonial items, with human services grants, a number of ways. But after getting a request, and it's also unusual for a whole federal government, in my opinion, to potentially shut down based on one particular organization that provides healthcare services. So I understand the unusual request up to us, and I think based on the city's very decades-long experience and connection, positive ones with the organization, it was worthy to do this today. So there is in the packet, and it was on the council agenda report out on the website, a draft resolution that myself and Councilmember Rio approved, and it does have some localized language about our local affiliate and then the city's connection to it. So that's what we're looking at here today. And what we asked is, and I'll have Councilmember Murillo speak, and then have the president CEO of the local Planned Parenthood affiliate come on up and give a brief presentation about services here locally, and have any questions anyone wants to make, and then bring it open to public comment, and then back to the council for a vote. And when it comes back to council, it stays up here unless we ask any particular questions of anyone in the audience. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for your patience. I know we had a lot of other important items on the agenda, so it took a little while to get to this point. Ms. Murillo, did you want to add anything at this point?
Thank you so much. For me, this is just a simple recognition of the high-quality, low-cost services that Planned Parenthood provides for women and families in our city. It's a vital asset, providing wellness exams, and I just wanted to acknowledge how much the city has supported Planned Parenthood through our very modest grant program, and also acknowledge how much our residents have benefited from these services. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Great, thank you. So with that, I'd like to invite Ms. Tosh up to the podium here and give your presentation. Thank you. And you can move that mic down. There we go. I do that all the time. So thank you.
Madam Mayor and honorable members of the Santa Barbara City Council, my name is Jenna Tosh, and I am the CEO of Planned Parenthood of Santa Barbara, Ventura, and San Luis Obispo counties. I want to thank you for recognizing the critical role that Planned Parenthood plays as a trusted healthcare provider in our community. I also want to thank the supporters who joined us here today and those who could not be here with us but who shared letters of support. Last year, 36,000 patients received compassionate, non-judgmental care at our 5 health centers through the Tri-County area. Both men and women visited Planned Parenthood for a wide range of health services, including annual exams, breast and cervical cancer screenings, safe and legal abortion, vasectomy and tubal sterilization, STD testing and treatment, birth control, and sexual health education. Planned Parenthood's top priority is and will always be the compassionate care that we provide to our patients. It's why 1 in 5 American women have trusted Planned Parenthood for care at some point in her lifetime. It's why one of our patients, Michael, trusted us for care. She wrote, "Whenever I've needed help and didn't have a GYN of my own, couldn't afford it, or it wasn't in my hometown, I've always been able to find Planned Parenthood, and they always gave me the immediate assistance that I knew would be reliable. As a student, away from home without much income, they provided my only medical care, since all I really needed was gynecological care. When I was sexually assaulted, I knew where to go. I've told my 3 children, who are now adults, if they ever needed services, that's the first place to go. They offer urgent care. If they can't help you, they will know someone reliable who can. What other services can I say that about?" The most recent attacks on Planned Parenthood are part of a larger pattern of unlawful harassment and intimidation of trusted providers of reproductive health, and it is an attack on the health and well-being of our patients. These attacks are part of a larger political agenda to defund women's health care and to eliminate safe and legal abortion. There remains tremendous opportunity to improve sexual and reproductive health and meet still unmet needs in our communities. And for these reasons, I thank you for standing with Planned Parenthood and the women and men who rely on us for quality, affordable, and non-judgmental care. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any lights up here, so we're going to move on to public comment. You'll have 2 minutes here at the podium, and I'm going to hold people to that. And so when you hear your name, please come forward. And we'll start with Lauren Beckew, be followed by Brandon Morris.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I have personally experienced the fear and sadness that comes with unplanned pregnancy. I turned to Planned Parenthood because they offered me a solution. The abortion issue is indeed very personal to me, because had I not changed my mind on the morning of my appointment, I would not have the high privilege and honor of being a mother to a 9-year-old boy. I am not here to convince you to change your personal view on abortion, on Planned Parenthood, or the value of their other services. But we are so often told that women's health care is a personal issue, and should be left between doctors and patients, not the government. Why then do you find it appropriate for our local government to publicly recognize Planned Parenthood when abortion is such a personal and controversial issue? The resolution that you are proposing states that Planned Parenthood contributes to the health and well-being of Santa Barbara County by preventing, quote-unquote, unplanned births. If you are prepared to look my son in the eye and tell him that his unplanned birth was a detriment to our community, then feel free to vote in favor. But as an alternative, might I suggest, Madam Mayor and Council Member, that you send a personal note of support and recognition instead. Thank you.
Brandon Morris will be followed by Linda Foster.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, this is an interesting issue. This is something that falls a little bit more into my expertise as opposed to the economics lesson that we had here on the city budget earlier. And there's some individuals on the City Council, the one specifically that's leaving in January, thank God, that wouldn't know what the Constitution was if someone tattooed it on their forehead. It's not about the right to choose. It's not about the right to life or the right to death. It's about what limitations do we have on the government? What constitutionally can you do? And even if an organization does do great things for our community, if they do have activities that are either illegal, unconstitutional, or otherwise not allowed to be done by the government, I don't think the government funds should go towards supporting that. The question as far as the point to where life begins, which seems to be the biggest concern of most people, and I think it's funny that whenever we're searching for life on other planets, we're looking for, single cells to prove that there's life. But here on Earth, we can't use that as the same standard. I think that the government does need to stay out of these things as much as humanly possible. But that child that's developing inside the individual woman has rights too. They have a Fifth Amendment right. And to say that a person, it doesn't say a live human, it doesn't say anything about development. We're not going to go around killing mentally disabled people because they don't fit a certain standard of IQ or a certain standard of development. We have certain protections for people for that reason. And this government should not be supporting organizations that deny constitutional rights to our citizens. I think it's atrocious, and I think that
Thank you. Time's
history
up.
will tell.
Linda Foster will be followed by Steve Thomas.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. We're losing our moral compass in this country. Planned Parenthood isn't sorry for their horrific procedures. They're just sorry that they got caught. The videos that were made were not tampered with. They were the reality of what's going on now, and they have no conscience about what is going on. They're insensitive to this. I'm really, really concerned about the numbness, the fog that is slowly evolving in our society as the years go by. In the 50s, we wouldn't have ever thought of these things going on. The atrocious activity, I could go into abortion, whatnot, but the fact that these body parts have been exposed, this is like the tip of the iceberg, and taxpayers have had it. We want to get it defunded. Planned Parenthood, get them out the door. They have run their course. They burned out the candle. I think that we need to start over, get a good health care program going for the low-cost women that need this attention that they have been getting, and they're defending today. There are other programs. They won't go off the end of the pier with no health coverage at all. But Planned Parenthood has run its course. And it's time to start fresh, erase the chalkboard with all of these people and the activities that have been going on, and regroup. I'm real disappointed. I'm a taxpayer. I've had an abortion. I've repented for it. Many women are walking around out there now that people here don't address, that they regret this. I've spent many years crying over the guilt that I have gone through.
Thank you.
He would be 40 years old now, and I'm real sorry that he's not here.
Thank you. Steve Thomas will be followed by Mary Rose.
Madam Mayor and honorable council members, first, I urge the Santa Barbara City Council to reject this Planned Parenthood resolution. Planned Parenthood has been caught red-handed in the disgusting practice of selling baby parts. Planned Parenthood has offered not one single fact to counter what has been shown in the videos. Before passing such a biased resolution, why not ask Planned Parenthood to open its financial books to an independent auditor and prove that they are not profiting from selling baby parts? That they have not offered to do so is telling. All they have offered is an ad hominem attack about editing. Before passing this resolution, demand facts regarding the vivisection of baby parts and their sale. Whether or not Planned Parenthood is otherwise doing good in the community, this is a blood stain that overshadows everything else and will not wash away. And now for some late-breaking news. Planned Parenthood executives say in the latest video that it would be a public relations nightmare if the public finds out some of their clinics get money in exchange for fetuses in the latest video released Tuesday by the Center for Medical Progress. This could destroy your company and us if we don't time these conversations correctly, a Planned Parenthood official tells undercover actors posing as potential buyers in the video. We're trying to figure this out as an industry about how we're going to manage remuneration, another official tells the fake buyers, because the headlines would be a disaster. Thank you.
Mary Rose will be followed by Bonnie Raisin. Mary Rose here. Okay, Bonnie Raisin, be followed by Marion Rosecrans.
Good afternoon. I never thought that I would be talking about this in front of the City Council. It just doesn't seem as though it's a role for you to play. I went on the computer and Googled Title X to find out how this got started in the beginning, back with President Johnson and then Nixon and so on and so forth. It's become a public-funded enterprise that is what is now called Planned Parenthood. It was originally designed for low-income indigenous families who needed advice on how to not overpopulate their own families in the world. I mean, it was a good idea to learn about birth control. Title X monies was never meant to be used for abortion, ever. However, 25% of all Title X money goes to Planned Parenthood affiliates, and so they can come in the back door, and Planned Parenthood clinics are the nation's biggest private abortion providers. In other words, they are, but they're not, which is, I guess, how this latest horrible fiasco happened. Defunding Planned Parenthood in the role of taking care of people, families, and women who need care, medical care and birth control. But what we saw on those movies, on those tapes of what happened within the confines of Planned Parenthood did not do them any favors. Else I would not be here, because I don't think the government has any business funding abortion that is going to jeopardize the life of the woman.
Thank you. Your
and
time's up.
create a stem cell research project.
Your time's up. Thank you very much. Marion Rosecrans will be followed by Barbara Nahara.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. The subject needing your truthful attention here is about unborn babies, girls and boys, females and males, who are being aborted and their organs being sold by Planned Parenthood. Abortion at Planned Parenthood kills our unborn children. Planned Parenthood says a woman has control over her own body. But abortion takes control over another's body and kills it. There is medical documentation these tiny unborns struggle to escape the forceps that go after them. And it's called survival instinct. It's really strong. Unfortunately, the unborn baby loses to the much bigger person at Planned Parenthood with choice and law advocating abortion. So, who will advocate for the voiceless, helpless unborn? I will. Will you? Who in a reasoning society honors those who perform abortions? Who becomes the voice of the babies facing abortion? Please reject this resolution. Encourage your friends at Planned Parenthood to get out of the abortion industry and work for the good of all life, from conception to natural death. I am a 78-year-old grandmother and great-grandmother who prays outside of Planned Parenthood on Garden Street. But I'm called an extremist and a terrorist.
Thank you very much.
Please help them, but do not honor them.
Barbara Nahara, followed by Christine Cruikshank.
Madam Mayor and Councilman, I am here to totally oppose that this group condones what is going on at Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood does abortions and they do mutilations. These babies are in a society where we're supposed to protect our children, not kill them. It's very ironic if a mother kills her baby and puts it in a trash can or leaves it on the street, this woman is arrested. But that same child can be mutilated and killed by Planned Parenthood, and our government is supporting it. I'm a grandmother, and I have 14 grandchildren. My youngest grandchild is 9 months old, and she's a Down syndrome baby. She is the sweetest, most adorable child you've ever seen. Her mother and father love her, and her little siblings fight over who's going to entertain her and hold her. I can grant you, in several years, you will never again see Down children, and you know why? They will be aborted because they're not perfect. And what is perfect in our society? What's perfect in any one of us sitting here? We don't have such a thing. You know, these little babies cannot protect themselves. So who are we as adults? Should we not be protecting these children? I hope that each one of you would think about this. I cannot even imagine a doctor, a nurse, or any of these people that work in Planned Parenthood seeing those children taken out, ripped apart. They're ripped apart and sold. Parts are sold. How could they even think about it?
Thank you very much.
Protect children.
Christine Cruikshank will be followed by Debbie Saucedo.
Time. I find the timing of this resolution an insult to our community. The legal process and investigation of the videos hasn't really even been done. If this was an oil company, would you be up here with a resolution defending the good for the oil, what good comes from oil? I don't think so. The blood on the hands from these babies, should you sign this resolution, will be on your hands. I know this is a very emotional issue for many. I find that we give more to the Delta smelt than we give to innocent unborn children. We have Obamacare now. We have other federal agencies that provide funding for low-cost families, yet we continue to provide funding for Planned Parenthood who wants to profit off this. And once again, I think the timing of this council to bring this up is very insensitive, and it lacks poor judgment and tact. And it's a huge disappointment. I just wanted to be here and voice that. Thank you.
Debbie Salcedo will be followed by Rhonda Wesson.
Good afternoon, council members. I am appalled that this is even being considered in light of the recent media reports. I understand that our mayor, Helene Schneider, has requested, along with Kathy Murillo, that this be done today. I think that's interesting because I noticed when Mayor Schneider, and this is very respectfully, when you were running for mayor, I Googled you. I thought, well, gee, who is she? What has her career been? Your entire adult resume is that you came up through the ranks of Planned Parenthood. I don't know any other career that you have had. So to quote Greg Hart in his comment about Dale Francisco, that really puts this in a difficult light. You, of all people, might want to be considering to wait to even think about doing something like this until there has been a thorough investigation of these media reports. Yes, I do feel that Planned Parenthood needs to be completely, thoroughly investigated. This is our taxpayer money. I hope you will all vote on this with your conscience and postpone this, if nothing else, until this can be properly looked into. And yes, I am forever grateful there was not a Planned Parenthood when I was born. My mother had 3 children, my birth mother. She certainly didn't want me. I was adopted,
Thank you. Time's
not
up.
aborted. Thank you.
Rhonda Welston, or Hueskin. I'm sorry, you have to pronounce your last name for me.
My name is Rhonda Hueskin.
Thank you.
This is really, really hard for me to even talk about because it's very disturbing. How can you support an organization that harvests baby body parts and sells them? I mean, I can't even think about that. I mean, it's really, really upsetting to me. Have you watched any of the videos? And they've complained that they've been edited. Well, probably they have to shorten them. But really ask yourself, is this what we've come to kill babies, to sell their organ parts? And then on top of that, some organ parts are more desirable than other organ parts. So they actually, it's just too much. I mean, they do things they crunch them so they can save other parts so they can get them. I mean, where's our moral compass? Like that other gal said, we care more about the Delta smelt than we do about little babies and their baby parts. And this discussion happens over lunch. It's callous, and I just don't want to be associated with this, and if I can't see how you would. And doesn't Planned Parenthood have to be held accountable for things that are not within the law, selling baby parts? I know that when I get a ticket around town, I pay it. I have to be accountable. I have to be accountable for a lot of things. Please think about it. I mean, can you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and know that you agree with this?
Okay, then there are a number of people who say they're here and may or may not want to speak, and I'll put the names in, and you're welcome to come up to speak if you'd like to. There's Gina Fisher, Julie Mickleberry, Angie Swanson, Joan Vignocchi. You're all saying that you are in support of Planned Parenthood, but don't necessarily need to speak. Haley Hager. Ms. Mickleberry, would you like to speak? Come on up.
Madam Mayor and honorable members of the Santa Barbara City Council, my name is Julie Mickleberry. I'm the Vice President of Public Policy and Communications for our local Planned Parenthood affiliate, and I wanted to take the opportunity just to clarify a few of the comments that I heard today. Fetal tissue research has been happening under congressional oversight and guidance since 1993. A very small number of Planned Parenthood health centers, it's about 1%, have provided fetal tissue to reputable research studies with full patient consent while following the highest ethical and legal standards, as well as all state and federal laws. This research is focused on finding cures for our most difficult diseases such as Parkinson's, cancer, and Alzheimer's. Although our local Planned Parenthood affiliate has never participated in tissue donation, we value women's contributions to life-saving medical research. Women's personal decisions should be respected, not attacked, and not politicized. Planned Parenthood is no stranger to harassment and political attacks. The recently released deceptively edited videos targeting tissue donation are just the latest in an ongoing campaign of harassment by those who want to ban abortion and eliminate funding for programs that provide women access to birth control and life-saving cancer screenings. The outrageous allegations made in these videos are simply not true, and the 5 states that have investigated Planned Parenthood have found absolutely no wrongdoing. Neither Planned Parenthood nor the women making tissue donations profit in any way. It's clear that the discredited activists behind these videos will stop at nothing to prevent Planned Parenthood from providing critical reproductive health care to the millions who rely on us. They will not be successful. We won't let that happen, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. And then the other speakers, if you want to come up to speak, Emma Meyer, Kim Cowles, Lindsay Soleimani. All right, I'll go through that in a minute. Leora Goodman, who's representing Hannah Beth Jackson, State Senator Hannah Beth Jackson, Sherry Madsen, and Clover Brohead Gowing, Dr. Gowing. So you're here in support, but don't wish to speak. That's fine. And then Mary Rose did show up. Is that right? Did I hear that? Did you want to speak at this time? Because I went over your... No? Okay. Okay, so that closes the public comment. It's back to the council. Mr. Hart.
Well, I think this is appropriate for us to pass this resolution today. I think that, unfortunately, some of the information that has been echoed today is part of a concerted, orchestrated effort to politicize women's health care issues and to spread falsehoods about what Planned Parenthood does. And I think it's a shame. I think that, in the interest of ideology and misplaced passion, I think that there's been a lot of noise about this issue that is inappropriate, that isn't fair, that is misguided. And I think that it is important for us as a community to recognize the incredible value of the services that Planned Parenthood provides on a daily basis. There's 9,000 patients of Planned Parenthood in the city of Santa Barbara, many of them low-income individuals that wouldn't have access to health care services without the existence of Planned Parenthood. That's vitally important to the community, for everybody. And I just think that it is appropriate at this time in Washington going crazy with potentially threatening funding at a federal level for these vital services across the country. It's important for local governments to stand up and say, enough is enough. It's time for us to speak back to that kind of agenda.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, these things have been, I think, even for you, difficult to listen to. I don't think it's a media question. I think it's more of a moral question. I, frankly, have supported and been a part of situations where abortion seemed appropriate. But when I heard that there were, this is really hard to say, identifiable body parts involved, that suddenly means not an abortion to me of a fetus, but of a incipient child. Knowing that, I believe, not only Planned Parenthood, but others with government approval can do abortions up to 26 months. My nephew, in fact, was born about that time. He's 30 years old now and happy and healthy. Having lived with a grandson recently, a young little guy, 1 year old, brings home to me more than I'd ever had before, honestly, even bringing up my daughter, of how important young lives are. And I think you must feel that way too, and are caught to some degree in a difficult situation where on occasion or maybe often you feel that abortion is appropriate, and it may be, but not this late stage. So there's absolutely no way I can support something that, even though I think much of what you do is positive, I've seen no contrition either nationally or locally for the conduct that has been admitted to. And I think Planned Parenthood would be a much better organization if it changed its ways, excuse me, regarding this, acknowledge that perhaps it hasn't done right in the past and could do better in the future. That kind of admission I think I would support, but short of that I can't. Thank you.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With all due respect to the deeply held beliefs by everyone in the room, I'd like to make a motion to pass this resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Francisco?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's very unfortunate that this resolution was brought forward. This is obviously a bad time to be doing PR for Planned Parenthood. I will acknowledge with everybody up here, I think, that Planned Parenthood's work when it comes to women's health care is fine. Who could object to that? Obviously, a lot of people are opposed to abortion, and I hope everyone is opposed to the sale of fetal tissue. Now, we don't know for sure that that's going on, and we've just been assured that it hasn't happened here in Santa Barbara, and I'm glad to hear that. But one of the speakers brought up the 10th video that was just released today. And I want to read you a quote from that video. And I don't know who this woman is, but her name is Deborah Vanderhei, and apparently she works for Planned Parenthood Federation at the national level. And the quote from her, and I heard this, she said these words, was this: I have been talking to the executive director of the National Abortion Federation. We're trying to figure this out as an industry about how we're going to manage remuneration, because the headlines would be a disaster. Well, that's certainly true. One of the reasons I originally ran for city council was because I do not want these national issues that city council has nothing to do with brought before us and discussed. And as I said, look, ladies, Planned Parenthood supporters, Planned Parenthood workers, I have nothing against the health care work that Planned Parenthood does. I have a problem with abortion. A lot of people do. And I think everyone in this country has a problem with potentially, I'm not saying it's certain, but potentially what these videos have exposed. And until the investigation is complete, we won't know the answer. I hope that Planned Parenthood is vindicated, but I fear, based on what I've seen, Planned Parenthood will not be. This is absolutely the wrong time to be bringing this kind of resolution forward. Now, I will I'll also say that I'm thankful, Madam Mayor, that you removed the most inflammatory language from the resolution. I appreciate that. But I also want to point out another statement in this resolution that I believe is incorrect, and I want to explain why. So the resolution says, in part, congressional or other efforts to defund Planned Parenthood and the Title X Family Planning Program would cut off health care services to millions of men, women, and teens and significantly harm public health and the health of millions of Americans. The legislation in question is very brief and very simple. It was put forward by Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa, and it's so brief that I'd like to read it to you. Congress finds as follows: state and county health departments, community health centers, hospitals, physicians' offices, and other entities currently provide and will continue to provide health services to women. Such health services include relevant diagnostic laboratory and radiology services, well child care, prenatal and postpartum care, immunization, family planning services, including contraception, sexually transmitted disease testing, cervical and breast cancer screenings, and referrals. Many such entities provide services to all persons, regardless of the person's ability to pay, and provide services in medically underserved areas and to medically underserved populations. All funds no longer available to Planned Parenthood will continue to be made available to other eligible entities to provide women's health care services. And then finally, notwithstanding any other provision of law, no federal funds may be made available to Planned Parenthood Federation of America or to any of its affiliates, subsidiaries, successors, or clinics. And then this rule of construction. Nothing in this act shall be construed to reduce overall federal funding available in support of women's health. So what this legislation proposes, and by the way, this will never pass. I don't believe that the Republicans in Congress have the courage to do this. But what this legislation proposes is that all of the money currently used to fund women's health care, including the $500 million a year that goes to Planned Parenthood, will go to other clinics that provide exactly the same, and in many cases, more comprehensive services. So this idea that somehow this is an attack on women's health or women's health care is simply false. I absolutely understand Planned Parenthood's not wanting to lose $500 million a year in federal taxpayers' money, but it would have no effect whatsoever on the provision of health care for women. So, but again, as I said, I do appreciate the mayor's removing the most provocative language from this resolution, but I still cannot support it. Thank you.
Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I'm a dad. I'm a family man. I'm pretty sure I know where my moral compass is. But this is a political football, and with all due respect to my colleagues, I really resent the fact that we're even talking about this up here today in terms of a resolution. This is a national issue. I am a supporter of Planned Parenthood. I know that there's a lot more that goes on than just the procedure that gets talked about. The fact that we're beating this to death up here on this dais in City Council, though, is irritating, to say the least. These kinds of resolutions are window dressing. They're not particularly effective. Other than a pat on the back, I'm not really sure what this does. I'm not opposed to the resolution. I'm not for the resolution. I mean, it's relatively meaningless, and this is why I resent this very highly emotional, very heartfelt discussion that has nothing to do with the business of City Council. Going forward, I would appreciate it if all of us on council stuck with the stuff that we do, fixing potholes and getting your street lights lit, and stayed away from these kind of issues.
So I appreciate all the comments actually today and in the respectful nature that they came about. The one person mentioned my background, my professional background. I've never held away from that. In fact, I've celebrated being a former employee of our local Planned Parenthood affiliate. I was a patient of Planned Parenthood as in high school. I interned at Planned Parenthood in upstate New York when I went to college and volunteered before getting a position at Planned Parenthood. So, I've never shied away from that. So that's no secret. In fact, it was in my first campaign literature piece, me standing with Planned Parenthood right outside the clinic. So those of you who know me know that my background in that regard. I think actually everyone up on this dais is correct that it is unusual for the City Council to have a resolution like this. There is a nexus between the city and the organization because each and every year we give human services grants to a number of different organizations, and we stand by their work. And it's an acknowledgement of their work. We have a celebration every year when we vote on those human services grants. And we've done that for a number of educational programs for Planned Parenthood as well as access to health care. The government funding federally is, for decades, have been for basic medical health care. And so what made me decide to agree to put this on the agenda, because as I said from the beginning, it's unusual. It's not something I normally would have done, even though I'm a very proud personal, supporter of Planned Parenthood, is that when an organization as well respected as this one is unduly attacked in a way that it does affect government funding, government relations in a number of ways, when we have members of high office who are actually considering closing down an entire federal government based on one organization and the good work that they do, I think it's important for local leaders when asked to stand up for Planned Parenthood. And that's what's going on here. So I would agree that I would rather not have to do a resolution here today. I'd rather not that this become as politicized an issue it is as we celebrate the 100 years that Planned Parenthood will celebrate in next year, that this is a way to celebrate education, health care, and the well-being for many people, and the decision for them to make very personal decisions that make a lot of sense for them and their families and their faith and however it is they wish to move forward and get it out of our hands and put it into theirs and have the access that they need in order to make those decisions in a healthy way. So I appreciate how uncomfortable it may be here this afternoon, and I acknowledge that. At the same time, I think it's still important to stand with an organization when they're being unduly attacked, in my opinion. With that, Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm, of course, saddened when we have divisiveness up here and in this room. We mostly get to yes on a much broader basis. And as probably many of you know, that Planned Parenthood to me has been one of my leading lights. I served on the board 40 years ago. I had some of my mentors were Dot Smith and Catherine Gray, and we, at that time, Planned Parenthood was a shed on Palm Avenue, and I had the privilege of participating in the fundraising to create the new building there. And again, I'd say I am saddened by when we hit these divisive points up here, but clearly, Planned Parenthood is just a great organization and has provided on-the-ground, root-bound services to this community, and it's a key part of the empowerment of women in this city and in the progress that we have made as a city in terms of progressive values. And I will be supporting the resolution.
Okay. Well, we have a motion and a second. I should mention, along with Ms. Tosh's speaker slip, there's a number of letters from a variety of different people. I believe this was at the Stand Up for Choice event, so we can have this to the clerk so we can hand that in. Since I believe we're going to have a split vote, if we could have a roll call, please, for the vote.
Councilmember Francisco?
No.
Hart? Aye. Hotchkiss?
No.
Murillo?
Aye.
Rouse? White?
Aye.
Mayor Schneider?
Aye. Okay, that passes 5-2. Thank you very much. And we do have a couple of quick items here, so on your way out, if you could leave your conversations outside, I appreciate it. With that, council member committee assignment reports. Ms. Murillo.
Thank you very much. I attended the Rental Housing Mediation Board meeting last week, and they were talking about several successful mediations, a handful of what they call cash for keys. When there's a difficult dissolution of a tenancy, they like to have a mediator there when the tenant leaves, gives them the keys, and they do the walkthrough. Just the description of how the mediators help when there's a third party there, it really helps the two parties, the warring tenant and landlord, break up peacefully. I also attended the Youth Council last night, and they're really making an effort to work with the PALS Leadership Council. And PAL, as you know, occupies the Teen Center, which is right across the parking lot. They're also attacking or addressing binge drinking, anti-bullying, and they're going to have a city council candidates forum, which is always lively. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Hart?
The Beacon board meeting that was scheduled for this Friday has been canceled and won't be happening until November, but I thought I'd say that since that's one of the things that I'm a council liaison to. Yes, exactly.
All
Thank
right,
you.
good for you. Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended the Water Commission meeting yesterday, and it was delightful to see our new directors or board members, Davis and Jordan, kick into gear on wastewater. It was a major presentation made by staff, and really the planning effort, I think, was enlivened by these two gentlemen with their obviously their many years of experience and their perspectives. I think we really have a couple of great new members of that board. And again, wastewater, not exactly a sexy topic, is getting a broadened look and I think a more in-depth look going forward. So, and we'll be hearing more about that. Oh, and the other thing is we're saving. Santa Barbara has done an even better job than our targets in terms of conserving water over the last 30 days. So kudos to our folks in that area.
And I just want to acknowledge, and I know Council Members White and Maria were there, the grand opening of the Children's Library. It was packed with so many kids, adults, and dogs. And actually, Tuesday afternoons is the ARF, right, which stands for something about reading, which is, gosh, I should know. It's where you can read with the dog, and it's really cute, and it's adorable. It's a great way to learn how to read. Anyway, go to the Children's Library. It was really a great event. And okay, so with that, we have a number of closed session item to read.
Conference with City Attorney, existing litigation. Litigation is Carter Camille versus City of Santa Barbara, SBSC, case number 1438672. Reyes Tony M. versus the City of Santa Barbara, SBSC, case number 1416050. Wickman Monica v. City of Santa Barbara, SBSC, case number 1467345. Fox Karen et al. v. City of Santa Barbara et al., SBSC, case number 1469026. Martinson Trevor J. v. City of Santa Barbara, SBSC, case number 1486849. Corral Deborah and Sanchez Theodore, deceased trustees v. City of Santa Barbara, SBSC, case number 1466439.
Great, and we will adjourn from there. I do want to adjourn, in memory of one of our city employees who died suddenly yesterday, Alicio Campos, who was a maintenance worker. He started back in May 1990. He was very much involved with the SWAP programs, coordinating illegal camp cleanups. He was with Looking Good Santa Barbara. He's known as quote, saying, "I just do what they tell me to do." Well, and he did it well. So he's survived by his wife and 3 sons from a previous marriage, and we just want to acknowledge him and adjourn his honor and memory. So thank you.
You never returned. Remember, it's my heart